across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yeah, welcome to the Home of Common Sense. Thank you to Julia. Back in just over a week right here on Talk. Lots to get through. Angela Rayner's seaside flat in Hove is still under the spotlight. Apparently it's been vandalised with graffiti calling her a tax evader. That's not very clever, is it? She admitted, though, underpaying stamp duty on the property as pressure continues to mount on the Deputy Prime Minister. Here's the question. Can Angela Rayner survive? Straightforward. Can Angela Rayner survive? Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has told US Congress that any American visiting Britain could be the next Graham Linehan, warning that no one is safe from regulators and police over their social media posts, with authoritarian UK now comparable, these are his words, to North Korea. I think he's gone a bit over the top, but I take his point. Meanwhile, Reform UK members are expected to table a motion at their party conference beginning tomorrow, calling for transgender women to be excluded from female prisons. We're nearly there on that one, but not quite. Good luck to them on that. Details to come, everything you need to know, and of course all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So here's the thing, can Angela Rayner survive? Oh, this is brilliant, by the way. Apparently, the reason why Angela Rayner is being scrutinised and exposed via the media and elsewhere is got nothing to do with being a tax cheat, nothing to do with avoiding... No. It's nothing to do with something she might have done wrong, possibly even illegal, certainly against the rules when you're the Deputy Prime Minister. Nothing to do with that at all. Apparently the only reason she's being scrutinised and exposed is because she's a working-class girl with a northern accent. I mean, I kid you not. I kid you not. Peter Kyle is the Secretary of State for Science and Technology, so he's a member of the Cabinet, a man who should know better. This is piffle. Peter Kyle literally suggested that this was the case, that she was being singled out. Wouldn't happen to a Tory, said Peter Kyle. Where's he been for the last decade, for God's sake? This is piffle. These are extraordinary levels of gibberish and tripe that her protectors are now wheeling out. And as they have found, when the rubber hits the road, you eventually run out of road. This one from Conor Naismith. Me neither, but Conor Naismith is the MP, Labour MP for Crewe and Nantwich, who posted, I defy anyone to, you know, that interview. It wasn't really an interview. It was a kind of mates sit-in, like a girls' powwow between Death Rigby and Angela Rayner. Conor Naismith says, I defy anyone to listen to the interview with Angela Rayner and reach any other conclusion that the Deputy Prime Minister has tried to do the right thing at every turn in a complex technical area of tax policy. We all rely on advice. Anyone could make this mistake. Mate, you need to get in the bin, sunshine. So this whole thing is pivotal. Peter Kyle said it is it just gets better, doesn't it? He said it's absolutely right that somebody from... These are senior member of the British government. It's right that somebody from Angela's background should be as aspirational as anyone else about having somewhere that she spends on a Sunday or in her spare time or in the school holidays so she can spend time with her kids as anyone else. Just because it's Angela, with her accent and her background, people are treating her in a way they wouldn't if it was a Tory MP who was born into wealth and had a second home, which many of them already do. Mate, you really are on the wrong side of the track. There are two main reasons why this is damning for Rayner. Firstly, she's the housing minister. Not an incidental point. She literally works in an office with more housing lawyers and free advice than money could buy. Secondly, and maybe even more damning, is that she has made a living out of exposing malfeasance, particularly the wicked Tories, or scum, as she likes to call them. Her whole shtick has been about transparency and honesty in public office. Let's have a listen. Let's remind ourselves of our Ange in full action. Here she is.
Holding any position in public life should mean holding the high standards.
Well, she doesn't actually speak like that. I know you might go, yeah, that's a normal sentence for us. No, that was just a technical glitch. We will get it back. Essentially, there it is again. It's another speech, we'll bring it to you later, of Angela Rayner explaining that transparency and decency and honesty are all big aspects of the job, and if you're in public life, you've got to tick all of those boxes. And you know, whether you made a mistake or say you made a mistake, everyone that falls in this particular crack between the areas of legality or law, whatever it happens to be, will nearly always claim, well, I didn't know, did I? I didn't know, I didn't realise. I find it hard to believe that Angela Rayner, I mean, I understand that it's complex, I do get that. I was reading one piece earlier about exactly that from one tax expert called Mike Warburton, who'd made the point that it is incredibly complex and there are many areas, particularly if your money is in a trust and you therefore don't sort of own the house, it's not your name on it, you're not paying any mortgage on it, and it can be difficult. However, this is Angela Rayner, the Housing Minister. It's Angela Rayner, the Housing Minister, and the Housing Minister who would not have given a millimetre had this been somebody in opposition. Had this been a Tory, she'd have been the first out there bellowing like an old fishwife about why the scummy Tories are at it again, lining their pockets, their horrendous, opulent pockets of Tory doom every step of the way. Don't tell me you didn't know, Minister. I mean, come on, we've heard it so many times. She was the key cheerleader of all of this. We do now know, of course, that she faces an anxious wait for the results of that probe by the ethics watchdog, a man called Sir Laurie Magnus. Well, HMRC are also investigating, by the way, but Laurie Magnus could, in fact, decide her fate today. But even that won't be the end. She could, of course, be found to have broken the rules. She will continue to argue there was no intention. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. I don't know. She broke the rules. That's it, really. And then she said, I didn't break the rules. And initially she was absolutely certain she hadn't broke the rules. And then a few days later she comes back and goes, oh, it turns out, like, I've had a little look on the back of my fag packet where I did the calculations for a very, very complex trust versus mortgage situation, one house to another and all sorts of other paraphernalia that goes with. I did the turns out I actually managed to accidentally avoid £40,000 in stamp duty. And even if you believe her, I think the damage is kind of done now on this. The damage was the initial denial. The damage is the fact that if somebody like a housing minister cannot get the correct and absolutely spot-on advice, because, boy, bearing in mind, she'd been taken through the mill before on her housing arrangements. If that were the case, you might go, do you know what? Old Barry, who literally works in the office opposite me in the Department of Housing, one of the country's most sought after and genned up tax lawyers, he'll probably know the answer. Barry, can I just run these numbers past you, please? You might have done that, right? You might have thought if anyone has access to that kind of advice, it'd be our Ange. So she's kind of damned even if she did make a vague error of judgment. And of course it comes against the backdrop of her being the person that has called for transparency, honesty, right the way throughout her political career, particularly again of those wicked, nasty, dirty, money-trousering Tories. That's been her thing. Straightforward. Can she survive this? 0344 499 1000. That's where you leave a voice note as well. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Oscar Reddrop is with us, former advisor over there at Number 10 when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. Oscar, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Always good to have you with us. I mean, this little web kind of continues to become more complex almost by the hour. Three pads Rayner continuing to be hit from all angles after she admitted to dodging tax on the purchase of this. Well, we'll call it a third house. OK, we're being a bit mischievous. One of them's, goes with the job. But nonetheless, it's got three places. Let's have a listen to yesterday's interview that she gave. Very, very upset about what she'd done. Do spare a moment. You might need a handkerchief, Oscar, when you listen to this, because it's very, very emotional stuff from Angela Rayner. Here she is.
I took expert counsel advice on all of my affairs to ensure that everything was done proper, and that expert counsel said that the advice that I received was inaccurate because of the trust. I don't own the property, that is true. I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people. But because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
Well, there it is, Oscar. We're now familiar with the nuts and bolts of this story. I mean, can she survive this? Earlier, Liz Truss, former Prime Minister, sitting in this very studio, called her a first-class hypocrite. Where does this story go next?
Well, look, I mean, I think the ethics probe, if that finds that she's breached the ministerial code, you know, I mean, nothing surprises me in politics, and there are different standards, as you've alluded to, that apply to politicians and different parties, which is wrong, but it's just the way it goes. You'd find if she has breached the ministerial code, it is, you know, how can she continue, particularly on her housing brief? It's the specifics of that, which is just so gallingly kind of in your face rubbish from an Angela Rayner perspective. And you're quite right. I mean, it is quite hard to believe that she couldn't, and she knows the stakes. I mean, Mike, she's a very wily operator. She's not some rabbit in that. She's not a rabbit in the headlights, wet behind the ears politician. You know, she would have known the stakes of this, and you have to think she would have really, really wanted to, you know, double check, triple check
100%.
This was done the right way, particularly because she knows, as you explained before, that her housing affairs have been combed over by the media and the press. You know, previously. Can she survive, however? I am in some ways minded to think that she has a better shot than most at nudging through this, perhaps not in the housing brief, but staying as DPM and maybe being shuffled somewhere off, because you have to think about this in terms of what would happen next. If she loses the DPM role as well, hey, who knows? She might not even lose either. You know, very hypocrisy-ridden government at times. But if she loses the DPM role, then there'd have to be an election. I don't think that works for people in the Labour Party at the moment whatsoever. And she does have. And I work for someone who had it as well.
Just to clarify, Oscar, you mean a Labour election, not a general election, of course.
Indeed, not a general election.
That word, yeah. Even Angela can't create
not to get people overexcited.
I was going to say, yeah, just to clarify.
But the other subtle difference with Rayner is she does have, and I work for someone who had it as well, she does have a bit of a Teflon quality to her. She is able to slip and slide through controversies that would, you know, take out right in between the eyes 99% of other politicians. The interview she did with Beth Rigby was very purposefully kind of emotive, and, you know, but Beth is a top journalist, so I'm not, you know, calling into credibility there, but you know, you could imagine they get on quite well, and they have probably similar sensibilities to things. So that was stage managed pretty well, I thought. And it's funny, it's hard to put your finger on, but with the Tories, it got to a point where the media and the political kind of vibe out there was going for the kill at all times. You know, take off with their heads. We want another minister to resign. Gone. And you have to commend the opposition parties, you know, Labour in particular, for mounting that pressure. The Tories, for whatever reason, are not capable of doing that right now. So
Well, indeed, and Kemi Badenoch, of course, you know, as has been reported a lot in the last 24 hours, completely missed an open goal on this at PMQ. She had 50 minutes notice to do this. You know, in that role, 5 minutes notice would be enough to rejig and regroup and come up with a set of questions. What's interesting, as I said right at the beginning, Peter Kyle, the Science Secretary of State for Science and Technology, is saying, well, this wouldn't happen if it was a Tory. I mean, you worked at Number 10 when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. You were a senior advisor. You just said it there. I mean, this happened every day to the Tories, right?
Yeah, and the atmosphere that was out there, and there's all kinds of, maybe even without being too pretentious about it, but psychological reasons out there in the country at the time where it was febrile. It was just kill politicians.
Yep.
Every day it was, cabinet ministers, Tory MPs, Boris obviously himself. It was just febrile, and that's not quite there at the moment, and that hasn't quite settled in with Angela. So I think they might think they could buy a bit of time and maybe try and get through this. But in terms of Peter Kyle's comments, I mean, in terms of her background and her upbringing, and I'm going to put cards on the table here, as it goes. There are things about Angela Rayner I quite like. If I'm honest, she's quite human. She has a charisma to her. You have to respect where she's come from and where she's got to. But when Peter Kyle says it's her accent and where does he realise how hugely patronising that is? But you're telling me just because you come from a working class background that you don't understand, you can't get your house in order, and you don't know what's right and what's wrong, and that should be some kind of excuse. It's so condescending and patronising, 100%. And that is an attitude that is littered throughout the Labour Party. And I would like to think Angela Rayner herself would have winced when he said that.
Yes, you'd like to think so. And of course, now we've got Sir Laurie Magnus, who's the ethics watchdog czar, having a look at this very forensic man known on the inside as Line by Line Laurie. I just invented that, but I'd like to think that's what he does. He's going to come to a conclusion. Could even be today we hear that. But of course, that still doesn't mean she's going to get fired, even if he says, yep, you did break the code or you did break the rules.
No, it did. It doesn't. You're right. And again, a lot of people here who engage with politics in a way that is healthy, in that they have friends, family and a job, so not too much. They'd have their head in their hands maybe when I say this, but often, the black and white has done someone right or wrong isn't actually the thing that hangs them in the end. It is political pressure and the political will. And, I think there are people like Wes Streeting, perhaps, who would quite like to see Angela Rayner potentially pushed to the side, but it is awkward for Number 10. She garners a lot of support in that party, and actually maybe her being the kind of the queen on the other side of the water, potentially on the back benches, when this side basket case of a government in a year's time, let's say, gets even worse, and alternatives in that centre left of the party, maybe actually that would help Rayner if she was moved aside onto those back benches. So it's a real political calculation for Number 10. It's not simple, and unfortunately, to viewers out there, you need that political will sometimes to get to get rid of someone in absence of, I would say, a media at the moment, and not just a media, but just overall a vibe that is out there that isn't quite going for her. And that, I have to say, that speaks a little bit to her ability to ride these things out.
And you do wonder whether, a bloke called Boris who could ride all sorts of things out, which was extraordinary. Obviously, it didn't end like that, but we'll see what happens with Angela Rayner. Stay with us, Oscar. There's a lot to talk about, particularly Nigel Farage appearing at US Congress as well. We'll get into some of that too. In addition, we've got reform to hold votes on transgender issues to come too. Lots to get through. 0344 499 1000. Over to you. That question, can Angela Rayner survive? We're throwing that one out there as well. And any other elements to this you think are worthy of a bit of national airtime. Keep it here. 1:20. This is Talk.
it's looking very difficult for her. I mean, she's a first-class hypocrite.
Yeah.
She spent years and years attacking Tories over tax, over second homes. It's just the sheer hypocrisy of these people, you know. Ever since they've gone into government, it's been one scandal after another, you know, accepting freebies, you know, matters of, you know, private jets. Well, she should have resigned already.
Yeah.
She should have resigned already.
The reality is, it shouldn't. I mean, Keir Starmer's never going to sack her because he ain't got the backbone to do it. He must be the weakest Prime Minister we've ever had. So, but Angela Rayner, I think it's in her interest. This is not a happy day for me to stand here and ask for a fellow politician to resign, but I think what I would do in similar circumstances, if I've taken the moral high ground on payment of your taxes and said that people who don't do that and don't observe the tax rules should resign.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. We have Oscar Redrop with us, former number 10 advisor on the big issues of the day. Interesting one, this. Oscar, Reform UK members set to vote at their party conference tomorrow on transgender prisoners and how they are handled. This comes after the Reform prison czar Vanessa Frake made these comments recently.
Graham Linehan, the comedy writer, comedic writer.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we all know what the law is. I'm not going to go back over that yet again. But to my mind, everybody who is in prison deserves to be treated with humanity and decency. And that includes female prisoners and it includes trans prisoners. You know, everything in the prison service is risk assessed. And I am sure that the prison service will tie itself up in knots over the trans issue, just like many other public sectors have. And as Nigel said earlier, you know, we are at the beginning, and that is something that we will need to speak about clearly.
Yeah, but in terms of the problems in prisons, it's a relatively small one.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Tony Diver, Telegraph.
Tony Diver, Telegraph. Don't think we needed that bit, but nonetheless, there it is. That was the comments on transgenders in prison. I think the reason, just to mention this, and we'll make this brief, this bit, Oscar, because there's a better Nigel Farage story to talk about, is that it's very sort of pivotal to the DNA of reform, this, isn't it? That's why, I guess, this is sort of on their agenda.
It is, and I don't think the prison czar there was quite on reform message.
Yeah.
And they did tie themselves up in a little bit of knots on it. And I think actually quite a clever way of just drawing under a line on that is holding a vote. And I'm pretty sure, being very confident that the Reform Conference members will come to the decision that Reform leadership would probably like it to end up. So in a way, it's quite a smart way of just sweeping it under the carpet and moving on.
Absolutely right. Well, let's move to the leader of Reform UK. He is, of course, Nigel Farage. He went to Congress yesterday. I don't know whether anybody between him and George Galloway appeared at Congress, but Galloway had a magnificent time. Nigel Farage seemed to make a bit of an impact. He was speaking, of course, and warning that any American could be the next Graham Linehan. Let's have a listen to what Mr Farage said over there on Capitol Hill.
Graham Linehan, the comedy writer, comedic writer, and he put out some tweets months ago when he was in Arizona, and months later he arrives at Heathrow Airport to be met by 5 armed police. He was arrested and taken away for questioning. He's not even a British citizen. He's an Irish citizen. This could happen to any American man or woman that goes to Heathrow that has said things online that the British government and British police don't like. It is a potentially big threat to tech bosses, to many, many others. This legislation we've got will damage trade between our countries, threaten free speech across the West because of the knock-on rollout effects of this legislation from us or from the European Union. Don't allow, piece by piece, this to happen here in America. And you would be doing us and yourselves and all freedom-loving people a favour if your politicians and your businesses said to the British government, you've simply got this wrong. At what point did we become North Korea? Well, I think the Irish comedy writer found that out 2 days ago. This is a genuinely worrying, concerning and shocking situation.
Are we North Korea, Oscar? Did he slightly overstate it there? I can see why it feels like that sometimes.
He slightly overcooked it, but it's very, very clever politics from Farage. It really, really is. Even just visually there, just seeing him in Congress, kind of commanding the room like that. And he's absolutely pushing on an open door with the US in terms of the freedom of speech issue that they identify correctly that we have in this country, and the kind of almost the forensic monitoring of what we do and say online that is very dark and increasing by the day. So he's very smart to take this up as an issue. And on the case itself, it was shocking. It is shocking. And I think even Wes Streeting the other day said, like, we're probably going to have a look at this legislation.
100%.
Because it is so wrong. So wrong. And, you know, Farage, he would probably never admit to this, but I think has been a little bit nonplussed or disappointed, maybe, with at least on a superficial level, on a few issues, the relationship between Starmer and Trump. Trump hasn't quite gone for Starmer in ways that perhaps Farage would have found helpful. But on this issue, America fully understand where Farage and the UK are coming from. And I think we will see more American pressure. And that is probably the area more than any that we could start to see Trump really go for Keir Starmer on if things don't improve in this country. And Farage is very, very clever in being the person that really fuels that and pushes it along. And he's right to.
And he does it with a very credible tones and ease, a sort of casual seriousness that he approaches these kind of subjects, all part of I guess, the sort of vaguely mesmeric nature of Nigel Farage. He is, we touched on it in the first section, he is one of those politicians that kind of does command the room. Oscar, we hit the clock. Sadly, there were stories we wanted to cover, didn't even get to, but he is Oscar Redrup, former number 10 advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Your thoughts on any of that? 03444 499 1000. Can Angela Rayner survive? I'm also going to ask, is she the victim of a working class witch hunt, which is... That's quite funny, really, isn't it? Which is what one of her cabinet colleagues suggested was going on here. It's all cobblers, but if you believe it, I want to hear about it. Two guests coming up on that in a couple of moments' time. Details coming from you, and of course that number is also where you'd leave a voice note if you want a message, 87222. You're listening to Talk. It's 1:30.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. Let's get some comment from you as well on Angela Rayner. Here's a voice note from Jack.
Rayner will survive this because Starmer needs her to survive this. She'd be gone, but she would be welcomed with open arms to Jeremy Corbyn's new party. And they will then take up to or more than half of Labour's votes at the next election.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that point. Angela Rayner's political career hanging by a bit of a thread. She admitted she underpaid 40,000 quid in stamp duty on her flat in Howth. £800,000 flat. Her seaside home has been targeted now. This, by the way, nobody should be endorsing this, by vandals with graffiti labelling her a tax evader scrawled across the walls and fences. This comes as Downing Street says Keir Starmer could be informed as soon as tomorrow. Some are saying even today whether the Deputy PM has breached government sleaze rules. In a moment. We'll speak to Laurie Worstel from the Daily Sceptic. First, David Smith, property lawyer and partner at Spector, Constant and Williams. David, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Anyone who's ever sat through a court case involving taxation will know that it probably takes about 10 minutes before you start gnawing your own elbows off. And that's just the lawyers. It's a difficult and complex area. We all get that. We all understand it. But, I mean, you know, stamp duty, is that hard to work out?
It became a lot more complicated after George Osborne and then later chancellors created new, more complex rules for second properties. And the problem here is that actually everyone sort of thinks about second properties as people buying holiday homes, but actually lots of people have an interest in two properties if they've helped their kids out. And in Miss Rayner's case, it appears that she was involved in a trust, and the rules around trusts are very complex indeed. And it sounds as though there were pretty legitimate reasons for her to have transferred her property into a trust for the benefit of her disabled child.
Yep.
But there are rules about trusts and second properties, and I suspect that's where things have gone a bit pear-shaped for her here.
Yeah, and it seemed, when I was listening to the interview that she gave with Sky News, there was, you know, and obviously innocence or lack of knowledge, gullibility, whatever you want to call it, are no defences in any kind of law, really. Even if we understand the reasoning behind it, because her point was, well, look, I only live in one property, I've only got one mortgage, I don't literally, you know, it's not really my property, the other place, so it was reasonable to think this was not a second property in the conventional sense. Now, half of you can understand that. The other half thinks, well, hang on, you're the housing minister. You've got more access to legal advice on properties than probably anyone on the planet. So it might be a hard one to swallow, but you're right that it's complex. I think we can all agree you could fall foul of the law and the rules and not do it wittingly. But nonetheless, it doesn't absolve you of responsibility because you are still the person whose name is on the tin.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, also the optics of it being the housing minister who's made a lot of commentary about this area looks really bad. I think there's a point for the legal profession here as well, in that a lot of conveyancing solicitors give sort of slightly ad hoc advice about stamp duty, land tax, because anyone who buys or sells a property has got to think about it. But the reality is that some of that advice is often not terribly good. And I've certainly seen plenty of cases where conveyancers gave advice that was not particularly accurate about stamp duty, land tax, either forcing someone to overpay or potentially leaving them in a position, as here, where they've underpaid.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite difficult to find people who know this area of law very well. And I think, I know there's been a warning today to conveyancers that they should be more quick to say to people, you should perhaps think about some specialist advice in this area. And it looks as though, I mean, one doesn't know for sure, and I presume the Standards inquiry will look into this, but it looks as though Ms Rayner's been given some slightly ad hoc advice during her conveyancing, whereas she should perhaps have been referred for the specialist advice she ultimately took rather earlier in the process.
Indeed, and you might, I mean, this is almost a separate point in a way, David, but you'd think, you know, I'd extend this to anyone who's a cabinet minister. You'd think there'd be a rule, wouldn't you, in the cabinet that goes, right, anyone who's buying a house, going on holiday, buying a car, whatever you're doing, everything has to be run past this bloke in the corner because he knows all the rules. You might think that system existed, bearing in mind it's not as if we haven't seen politicians jump on these bear traps before.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that political parties don't make more effort to actually enter into fairly strong framework agreements with top-end law firms and run more of their senior people, through a particular funnel where it's being looked at quite closely. But, that would then get into sort of, I mean, the reality is that the political system in the UK has always had a sort of faint amateurishness about it, whereas
true.
Perhaps these days it should be more professionalised.
You would think so. So just briefly then, David, on the specifics of this, and it is hard for anybody to know all of the specifics, but it seems then that, because she has this property in Manchester that she doesn't owe, she can't sell it because it's in a trust. She's not making any money from it. Some might say, well, it's not unreasonable, therefore, to assume that the next place you buy is your only property. But from what we're kind of perming from this story is that despite all of that, it's in a trust, it's for, understandably, you've put provision for your child who has some special additional needs, etc. All of that makes, I think we all understand that, but it doesn't absolve you from the possibility that you are legally still declared somebody who is buying a second property, even if you can't benefit from the existing one.
Yeah, and there's a lesson here for lots of people who have probably helped their children in getting second properties as well by loaning them money. If they've entered into a trust arrangement, they may in fact have underpaid the stamp duty themselves, because the rules on trust arrangements are quite complicated, and you should think about some specialist advice on this.
Yeah, contact a lawyer. Contact David. That's maybe the that's the message here. Listen, David, thank you for coming on with us. David Smith, property lawyer and partner at Spector, Constant and Williams. Let's get a word from Laurie Worstel, associate editor at the Daily Sceptic. Afternoon to you, Laurie. I said at the beginning of all of this, and I don't think this is particularly controversial, nothing to do with Angela Rayner's accent, as one of her cabinet colleagues suggested, which was the most woeful of defences, or the fact that she's working class. Peter Carl saying, this wouldn't happen to a Tory. I mean, God, the Tories are pretty much annihilated by the press and certainly the opposition parties in the last years in office. So that doesn't really stand. The reason that this is Angela Rayner under the spotlight, and rightly so, of course, is that, firstly, she's the housing minister. She literally works in the office with more housing lawyers and free advice than money could buy. And secondly, and perhaps this is even more damning, she's made a living out of exposing malfeasance, particularly those wicked Tories. I mean, this is part of her shtick. It's part of her whole personality. If anyone's going to expose wrongdoing in the Tory party, it's our Ange. Go on, Ange, out you go. And off she wheels with a scum-laden monologue about the horrible Tories. So, I mean, those reasons alone are enough to, at the very least, compromise her position.
I think that's quite right, Ian, and good afternoon to you as well. I think it's really a hypocrisy issue here, more than the actual indiscretion or the mistake or whatever you want to call it itself. And yes, we have to remember, it wasn't just the media going after the Tories, it was people in the Labour Party, and people like Angela Rayner in particular. I mean, she really went after Nadeem Zahawi when he had a relatively similar tax issue, and in very, very stark terms, including that, for every bit of tax that's avoided, that is putting pressure on the public sector and public services, and that wasn't this such a immensely immoral thing to do. That was that really powerful narrative throughout really the last Tory administration, whether it was tax indiscretions, whether it was party, having a bit of cake at one point, or the fixed penalty notices. There was even one example where Rishi Sunak one day wasn't wearing a seatbelt in a video he did, and this was taken by Labour as some extraordinary indiscretion.
It's a menace of the roads.
Exactly. And so once they've done that for so long in opposition, now really they're being hoisted by their own petard.
Indeed. Laurie, let's have a little listen here to Angela Rayner on this very point in full flow. Here she is.
Holding any position in public life should mean upholding the highest standards of ethics and integrity. But the cronyism, sleaze and scandal we've seen over the past decade has undermined trust in politics and public life at home and abroad. Misconduct and sleaze has a direct impact on a government's ability to deliver for the public. Transparent and accountable government is key to delivery. Cleaning up politics is about ensuring government actually delivers for the people.
There it is, and it really sort of corroborates the point we've been making, Laurie. You can't really say stuff like that and then suddenly say, yeah, but it doesn't apply to me.
Well, quite right. It's almost as if you don't need me here. Rayner's biggest critic is Angela Rayner, really, just from the past. And yes, it's been a key line that they've taken. I think what's interesting here is that of course, Keir Starmer would love to sort of outsource this political decision to his ethics advisor, and the question is, what will he now say?
Yeah.
But really, this is a way of avoiding responsibility for it, in my view. And actually, the decision should be taken. You know, the evidence is in already. Is it politically damaging enough for her to go or not? And that does, in many ways, speak to some political cowardice there.
Yeah, and I get it. I can totally understand why you might make a mistake when trying to sort out the complex, as a previous property lawyer just told us. I don't have any doubt that it could be difficult, and I might even give her the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, it was an error, but it was a schoolboy error, or a schoolgirl error, if you like, in that sense. I mean, it shouldn't have been made. I don't imagine, again, back to the hypocrisy point, Laurie, if this had been a Conservative MP with exactly the same circumstances of the reasoning behind putting a house into a trust and provisions for their child who has some difficulties, I can almost hear it on a TV interview going, I sympathise with the minister's plight. However, the rules are the rule. She would say that.
Absolutely, and she'd be right to. I don't think people should be spared from this kind of scrutiny, whatever their background is. And I think it has been really a quite sort of cute and cynical way for Labour to defend her, which is basically always pivoting to this line that she's working class. Sometimes it even becomes snobbish in their way of defending her, which is this: maybe she didn't know, she's sort of not used to this kind of thing. She is a grown-up woman, she's a politician, she should know this.
Yeah.
And yes, they would be going after a posh Tory if they did this in precisely the same way.
100%. In terms of what happens next, we have Sir Laurie Magnus, the ethics watchdog czar, as I think you're meant to call these people. He's looking through the details. It could even be later today that he tells Keir Starmer whether she fell foul of the kind of regulations, etc. Doesn't mean she's got to walk the plank, though. We've seen previously Priti Patel was seen to have broken some points of the in-house rules. She remained in office, and I can only imagine, bearing in mind there's a lot of currency in Angela Rayner, particularly with Keir Starmer being on a bit of a wobbly wicket right now. My guess is she will remain in office.
I think quite possibly she will, Ian. Yes, I think there's several reasons. As you say, Starmer is wobbly at the moment, and particularly with relation to the left of his party. He's obviously already struggled to get that welfare bill through, and Angela Rayner is seen as being kind of a friendly face of that wing of the party and the unions as well. I think, ironically, one of the ongoing tensions that the media has liked to play up between Starmer and Rayner is that she's got quite a profile. There's she's spoken of as a potential next prime minister. In some ways, the fact of this scandal has actually reduced her market value for that particular position in the public's eyes now, and that could actually save her from Keir Starmer's axe, because now he doesn't see her as much of a threat.
Indeed. Listen, on that point, Laurie, great to have you on with us. Thank you. That's Laurie Woolstall, Associate Editor of the Daily Sceptic. I like that last point. She's weakened by this, and that may be very useful for Keir Starmer. She's not about to become the Prime Minister, but no one's going to, after you've been through that, are you really going to get the big job? Who knows? Gary says, even if the tax laws around trusts and stamp duty are complicated, you can get free, guaranteed 100% accurate advice from HMRC. So why didn't Rayner just ring them and ask? They have a helpline, they have an email address, and they have a postal address. It's not complicated. Just ask, and you follow the advice. You are fireproof. Yeah, if you've got it from HMRC. I did hear somebody earlier saying you could ring HMRC with a similar inquiry when someone was debating this very point, and you still might get 5 different answers depending on who you speak to or who you communicate with. However, whatever answer you got, if it came from HMRC on an email and it's there and it's logged, that I would have thought would be pretty watertight. Let's get a voice note on Rayner from Tony.
I think what we need to remember is that Keir Starmer was found to have broken the ministerial code on no less than 7 separate occasions, and that didn't even cause a ripple. So as much as it distresses me to say this, I've got to be honest, I don't think she's going to have any difficulty riding this.
Yeah, I think breaking the ministerial code, I wasn't aware that he'd broken it 7 times. But whether you get referred to the ethics watchdog, I think, is the the kind of barometer of wrongdoing. Is that about right? Thank you for that, Tony. More from you on the way. Can Rayner survive this? And which bit of this story stinks most to you? 0344 499 1000.
Should she go?
No, absolutely not. I think she should wait. We should all wait for the independent watchdog to come to its conclusions, and I'm very much hopeful that they're going to find in her favour.
Why should we wait for the independent watchdog where, in this case, when Angela Rayner has called for people to resign long before we've had a report from an independent watchdog for Tories caught up in similar scandals?
It's looking very difficult for her. I mean, she's a first-class hypocrite.
Yeah.
She spent years and years attacking Tories over tax, over second homes. It's just the sheer hypocrisy of these people, you know. Ever since they've gone into government, it's been one scandal after another, you know, accepting freebies, you know, matters of, you know, private jets. Well, she should have resigned already.
Yeah.
She should have resigned already.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. We'll talk to Angie in Plymouth in just a second. Back to Angela Rayner. Here's a voice note from Steve.
I'd like to ask the question why the other home was put into a trust in the first place. The reason for doing that was quite clearly to avoid tax and also to stop the government getting hold of my house. So, however you look at it, it's only tax advantages that makes you put it into a trust in the first place.
That's a good point. The reasons were perhaps understandable in terms of wanting her disabled son, who I understand has some pretty serious challenges, to have a home going forward, and therefore wouldn't lose out on that. But and whilst you can sympathise with all of that and say, well, what parent being in that position wouldn't try to do that? But you're right. You are still buying yourself an advantage by putting it in a trust, to try and surely avoid something, because otherwise you just go, yeah, here's my house, it's yours. Wouldn't that be the... I would have thought. So understandable, and within the law, I get that, it's within the law that you can do that, but this is all about the optics, isn't it? Angie is in Plymouth. What have you got for us, Angie?
Oh, hi, and lovely to speak to you for my first time with you.
Welcome along.
I thought I'd give Mike and Julia a break.
Good idea. Yeah, they need a break. In fact, Julia's just off for a week now. She's only just come back.
I know, bless her. Yeah, love her. But anyway, lovely to speak to you. Real privilege. I just wanted to say that my real issue with all this is that awful interview that went out on national TV yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, which I really passionately believe, and I've got 5 reasons. I'll try and keep them very brief, if you can bear with me.
Go for it.
But that really, it had nothing to do, it was just to try and evoke public sympathy. And so, she wasn't crying because she was sorry for what she's done. She was crying because she got caught.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? As a retired English teacher, and I do feel passionate about this, I really believe she is an intelligent woman and she is educated. I honestly believe she said done proper instead of properly, again, to try and evoke this image of a poor working class girl, which I find, as being married to the most wonderful, as you can imagine, very patient working class man.
Yeah.
I find it an absolute insult to working class people like my husband, who came from a very poor working class background, got into grammar school, worked his way up, and has provided for myself and our 6 beautiful children all his life. Yeah, he is super, trust me. And then our youngest is severely handicapped, so how dare she. This is where I had to calm down yesterday. I couldn't phone up yesterday. How dare she try and evoke sympathy using her handicapped child? I just find that unforgivable.
Mm-hmm.
Fourthly, she says that she puts her family first. Well, funnily enough, I consider myself to put my family first. Then you won't catch me being rowed about down on Timber Toe with some hunk, with my 8 grandchildren running around God knows where at home, because I do a lot of grandchildren caring now, sort of thing. And I do enjoy my wine, especially during Plank of the Week on a Friday evening, but not, proclaiming that I'm a family person and then on the beach during the day downing a vat of wine. And then finally, Starmer has not sacked her because if he gets rid of her, then he loses the vast majority that he's got, which are the extreme left wing. And that is what is so scary.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think you're absolutely bang on. It's kind of, though, a win-win in a way for Starmer, as our previous contributor said, Angie, that actually she would remain in position, but in a weakened position. She wouldn't quite be the same threat to Starmer as she might have been half an hour before. Listen, Ange, I've got to move, but you've been fabulous. Great to speak for the first time as well. Previous voice note mentioned that Keir Starmer had been found to have breached MP's code of conduct on 8 occasions. We're in a slightly different league here. These are about registering interests, like free football tickets, on time. So if you register them like a couple of hours or a couple of days late, this happens every day to MPs. So gifts and things like that, then you're seen to have breached the MP's code. It's the MP's code. So, yeah, he did, and he's a Prime Minister. He's got enough people around him not to make that mistake. But I think it's kind of slightly different territory in terms of its seriousness. Does that make sense? By the way, Ronald, good old Ronald Wood in Newcastle, says, when Nigel Farage stated we are North Korea, I think that was an understatement because they have a solid border. We do not. Great point. Good to hear from you again, Ronald. Thank you for that. John's in Leeds. What are your thoughts? John, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good as gold at this end. Far away.
Yeah, I had a run-in with the taxman around about 15 years ago after I got some advice when I sold my building after I redirected my business to another part of Leeds. To cut a long story short, I was advised I wasn't going to pay any capital gains tax on the building. Mm-hmm. After an investigation, it was proved that I did. Now, not only did I have to pay the tax, but my dad always told me never mess with the taxman because you're in trouble. And when they do, I think I was underpaid for about 25 grand. What they do, they sit opposite you, and they're on the police. Is right, you owe 25 grand, Mr. Holmes. We want that back within 1 month, and we're going to penalise you 25 grand as well. They can do that. They've got the law on their side.
Yeah, it's not like if you went to a magistrate's court and couldn't pay a parking ticket, you know, you might be able to negotiate something, but HMRC and particularly VAT, even worse, they will just put a random penalty on it. So they doubled it.
Yes, it is a penalty. Yeah, it's double it. But what they emphasised to me all along, Mr. Holmes, they are your agent, your solicitor and your accountants. They are your agents. It's you that signs the bottom line. You are responsible. So don't start deflecting. That was the long and short of that.
That's a brutal. I mean, look, by saying this, it sounds like I'm sympathising with Angela Rayner, and maybe on this specific point. But, you know, at what point do you, if you get advice from a solicitor and they have to be legally licensed, as does an accountant, you might think, you know, that does not completely absolve you, but 90% absolves you, right?
Yes, I think so. I think that what would be prudent after that is to take action against the people that gave you
Well, yeah,
advice.
indeed. Did you end up paying the full 50 grand?
Yes. I had to. You can't mess about. They'll come and take your house.
You come and take your house or put you in the slammer. Listen.
Absolutely.
But you wouldn't want to go through that again, would you? That's John. He's down there in Leeds. Thank you to John. Great point, though, as well, about ultimate responsibility. So Angela Rayner cannot point it at others. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. We'll get the news now at 2 o'clock right here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense, of course. 0344 499 1000. There's a shed load of material to get through here. We are, of course, talking on Angela Rayner. Her seaside flat in Hove was vandalised with graffiti, calling her a tax evader. Nobody wants to see that, but she has admitted underpaying stamp duty on the property as pressure continues to mount on the Deputy PM to resign. Can Angela Rayner survive this? A fairly straightforward question. And the other point raised by many of her supporters is that it's because she's got a northern accent and she's working class. That's why people are going for her. This is absolute arrant nonsense, flannel juice and piffle. Thoughts on that too? Also, Nigel Farage has told US Congress that any American visiting Britain could be the next Graham Linehan, warning that no one is safe from regulators and police over the social media posts with the authoritarian UK now comparable to North Korea, said Nigel Farage. We'll talk about this in just a couple of moments. And the Green Party's new leader, Zach Polanski, says shoplifting by people in poverty is justified and should be met with compassion despite offences hitting a 20-year high. I think some of the gratuitous, if that's the right way to describe it, examples of mass shoplifting are not really archetypal single mothers who are trying to get some baby food for their kids or even some fish fingers to feed their children. I think we're talking about something on a different scale here, but that's his point and your response to that. Everything you need to know, 0344 499 1000. Lucy says Rayner will survive if tax law is too complicated for the Deputy Prime Minister. What chance do the rest of us have if she's made a mistake and expects to be forgiven? Perhaps we little people should also be able to expect the same. Elaine says, I'm sick of everyone blaming the lawyers when they've already come out and said they told her what she would have to do. And there's a little piece highlighted by Elaine from the Sunday Times. She said she'd been given advice by her lawyers at the time she bought the Hove flat. However, the barrister consulted by Rayner advised her that as she was a trustee to her son's trust fund, she was still seen to have a financial interest in the property. She claims that, of course, new advice that she then got told her, actually, no, you do probably owe this money, probably because of the aforementioned, and therefore she's willing to pay it. Now, paying it afterwards, going, sorry, Gov, I didn't know, as our previous caller before the news brilliantly highlighted, is no defence. And HMRC can come after you and will probably fine you and penalise you. The question, of course, more pressing is, does she survive as Deputy Prime Minister? Does she survive as an MP? What has it done to her integrity? Bearing in mind she is not only the Housing Minister, not an inconvenient fact in all of this, but she's also someone who's spent a lot of time essentially sniping, and understandably so, at opposition MPs, particularly those scummy Tories, for being caught doing similar things, shall we say. More response on that, 0344 499 1000. I do want to talk about Nigel Farage. I thought this was really interesting. He went over to Congress yesterday and made a what they call a powerful address. I think George Galloway did the ultimate powerful address to Congress some years ago. Google it if you've never seen it. But Mr. Farage was over there warning any American could be the next Graham Linehan to be arrested after arriving in our awful authoritarian Britain. The Reform UK leader was testifying before the US House Judiciary Committee, where he compared the UK to North Korea. He said no one was safe from overbearing regulators and police. After being branded by the Democrats a Putin-loving free speech imposter and a fringe politician, Farage was also forced to deny that Donald Trump was his political mentor. Let's speak with James Ball, political editor at the New World Mag. Good afternoon to you, James.
Good afternoon.
It's an interesting one, this. I have to say, I didn't really like the idea of a British politician going over to the Americans going, we're terrible, don't come over here. I didn't think that was a great look. But I think
it's a particularly weird look for Nigel Farage, isn't it? He spent most of his political career campaigning for us not to be run from Brussels. I don't think it really works for us to be run from DC now, does it?
Well, his argument, I suppose, in fairness, is that, look, America are now talking the language of common sense. J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, even Elon Musk, they're all wading in and just going, look, stuff that goes on social media. I mean, there are some horrible things that happen, and, you know, if the boys in blue take action, you know, we get that. If you say, let's go go and murder Bob at number 53. That's a terrible thing to do and it should be investigated. However, there has been, whatever way we slice it, James, a litany, a daily occurrence of people getting nabbed for a few words on Twitter. And that's not a mischievous or a hyperbolic point in this. That's really Mr. Farage's overall argument here.
I mean, Nigel Farage is a bit of an odd one to talk about this. He asked for Joe Brand to be investigated by the police for making a joke about him on Radio 4 once. She joked someone should throw battery acid at him instead of a milkshake. And he said it should be reported to the police. So, you know,
but isn't that a good example of somebody crossing the line?
Yeah, do you think Joe Brand really intended to threaten it?
I don't think Joe Brand did, but in the same way that I can't remember who the MPs, and I think we've had Tory and Labour both sort of said things about lynching or, you know, hanging or whatever. You know, we know that, you know, Joe Cox, David Amos, we know that's a particularly sensitive area, shall we say.
It's not a joke I would have made, but he does have a point. I mean, part of the problem that we have is that police are arresting about 1,000 people a month over social media. That's far too many. It's insane. But it used to be that if you saw a bad thing on Twitter, and there are some really hateful and abusive and mildly threatening messages that I think we all agree shouldn't be there, even if we don't think it should be police, it used to be they'd get moderated, they'd get deleted, problem done. The issue now is Elon doesn't do that. No one puts any pressure on Twitter, so the message stays there and you either report it to the police or you do nothing. So Elon's outsourced all of this to the police, and that's why they're sort of doing it. Yes, we've got bad laws. Yes, it's going too far. But I think it's a bit interesting to kind of go to the people causing the problem and say, oh, no, please fix it.
It's funny you mentioned the word moderator there, because it just took me back to the old chat rooms when, you know, these were largely things that were constructed just by individuals, and the moderator was usually the person, and, you know, you'd get banned for something you said, and it was a bit of a Wild West moment. There was a chat room for country music fans. There was a chat room for people who liked leather and a billiard ball in their gob. There was chat rooms for goodness knows what. They were all there. And, of course, at the time, these were seen as little fringe things. What seems to have happened, James, and I can only guess this is the thinking of, shall we say, the establishment, that things like Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, they're no longer little side dish elements of life. They are almost a parallel universe. They're hugely, widely seen, widely reported, globally public statements. Therefore, there are implications to what you write. Is that, do you think, where this has all gone perhaps slightly wrong? We can't just go, it was just Twitter anymore, in the same way we couldn't say it was just the Daily Telegraph.
It's exactly the problem. You're right on it. It's too big to be a community. It's too international. I mean, Facebook's got 2 billion users. That's way too many. I quite like Reddit for this. Reddit is a social network. It's got a couple of 100 million people on, but it's divided into hundreds and thousands of little communities called subreddits. And each of those sets its own rules. It's got its own moderators. And some of them, you can't even make jokes. They're for things like talking about bereavement or about, you know, raising your disabled child. They're really strict. And you are straight out, but you don't lose your Reddit account. You don't lose anything else. You just can't go to that community. So you've got basic rules and then self-enforcing communities. It's a great way to run the internet. It's a shame it only runs on Reddit. But I don't think we need British politicians missing the first week of Parliament being back to go and ask Republicans in America to do what? I mean, it really was a bizarre trip. And I found it personally very rich to see Nigel Farage say what a great booster of free speech he was, because I got an email about 2 hours before he sat down banning me from attending his party conference this weekend.
James Ball has been banned. Well, you sit in good company, because Dale Vince, the kind of eco man, has been banned as well. I think he was originally said, you know, he could go, and then they said he couldn't go. But then, would that not be... I mean, I think you're a great journalist, James, and stuff I've read. If I was leading Reform, I probably wouldn't want you there, because I'd think this bloke, you know, he's a lovely fella, James, but he's only going to get up to a bit of mischief, isn't he?
I mean, look, I disagree with Nigel Farage, but I don't, you know... I'm a political journalist. He's a politician. Keir Starmer, the guy he keeps saying is risking turning the UK into North Korea, I've said some bloody rude things about him, and Labour's letting me in their conference. You know, is Nigel Farage really that scared of me? I mean, I am not that much of a threat to him. I wish I could cause his politics more trouble, but...
Yeah, I mean, I do...
How am I more pro-free speech than the guy who just testified to Congress?
Yeah, and it's a bit like the council, the Reform-run council that banned a bunch of journalists from there. I mean, did they not read the room when they did this? I mean, it's such a ridiculous thing to do. And, you know, bearing in mind the whole free speech thing, I was about to say, you know, I don't even need to make the claim that it's in their DNA. Their leader's just gone to Congress to shout it from the roof. So... And when you have that, and I suppose similarly with Trump, you know, he's talking about free speech, but God knows how many people he's banned from press conferences in the White House. And, you know, you now go to jail for a year if you so much as, you know, accidentally barbecue the American flag. So there's all sorts of contradictions in this. And I do find it disappointing that, you know, when I see a party, whether they're, you know, in the same way Jack Palahniuk's just taken over the Green Party, if he did something that I thought was very anti his position, even if I would never vote for the bloke in my life, I'd be disappointed, because I think, no, you know, I want the consist. I want good politicians, left, right, or wherever the hell they are. I don't want to see the hypocrisy or contradictions in what they espouse very publicly.
Exactly that. Nigel Farage wants to sort of plant the flag for free speech. I mean, that's good. That's actually something I would agree with him on. Free speech is a good thing, and the UK doesn't do as much as it should to protect it. But if he's got to turn around and ban critical journalists from his conference, doesn't suggest he'd be that good on it when he's in power, and it doesn't suggest he's very confident.
Do you think
I mean, if he can't do it when it's this easy, what's he got to do when he's in power?
Well, do you think we're like North Korea? Has it gone that far?
I think, given that we can still chat on radio, we've probably got a little way to go to North Korea, even if we've got our problems.
James, you say that. There's 6 police officers outside this window, and as soon as I go to a break, when we come back, I won't be here, I can promise you.
Yeah, well, I've got to say we're not like North Korea. You won't believe what's out of shot for me.
Love it. James, thank you very much indeed. James Bull, political editor of the New World Mag. Listen, I mean, he's right. He's absolutely right. I can see why Nigel Farage would look at James Bull and go, he's probably a bit of a lefty. Why do we want to give accreditation to him? But similarly, I sense that the Reform are emboldened by going, yeah, we don't ban people. We don't ban the critics of our party or our thinking. I mean, if I was Farage, I'd invite Dale Vince to give a speech at one of the kind of fringe groups. I mean, I can't imagine what the reception would be like. You might have to have some hefty bouncers by the stage. But wouldn't that really seal the authenticity of the free speech card? I'd certainly be having a word with the councillor in, was it Nottingham, wherever it was, where a local newspaper or a certain couple of journalists were banned from attending council meetings. I mean, you can't be doing that if you're Reform. I can see the Tories doing it. I can even see Labour doing it. But as James Bull just said, he's not being barred from the Labour conference, despite some pretty pithy and, you might say, unkind things he said about Starmer. And he's not banned from the Tory one either, when he's absolutely annihilated Kemi Badenoch. Thoughts on that? The North Korea analogy. I'd like to explore that a little bit more. I know why Nigel Farage said it, and when you look at, if you look at the Graham Linehan story in isolation, you could say that one story is enough for anybody to reasonably draw the conclusion this is a bit like North Korea. Blimey, it's interesting, that phrase. I've been using that analogy of North Korea on the radio for about 20 years, when we get anywhere near a bit of territory that looks vaguely authoritarian or dictatorial from our political masters in Westminster. But here it is, being said loud and proud on the global stage by Nigel Farage. Do you agree with him? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word from Pav in Harrow on good old Angela Rayner. What are you making of it, Pav? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Can I just preface my Angela Rayner comments? I just want to clarify something, because what you've just been talking about, for me, is something which people often get confused. The supporting free speech, whether it's absolute or curtailed, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give the person a platform. What you're doing is you're supporting their right to be able to say what they want. It's something, and censorship in that regard, we have to present a nuanced picture here.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that I have to hear it. So the left in particular, I'm not saying just the left, they often get their sort of their undergarments in a twist with this sort of stuff, but they're not the same thing, just to be fair. I'm not trying to defend Farage, albeit I think, by the way, before I go on to the main point, I think he went there not just for anything else, but it improves and ameliorates his image on the international stage.
Of course it does.
Presumably,
yeah, absolutely.
With the next president.
Yeah, anyway. I do, and I also agree, Pav, just on that very point, that just because you're not invited or you're uninvited does not demonstrate that you're therefore anti-free speech. You may just not want to invite someone, and you don't have a legal duty or a moral one to invite them just to corroborate that you're pro-free speech. I get it. Angela Rayner, what do you want to say?
Right. Well, I've got something to say, so hope you allow me to say it as usual. And then I've got, I'll tell you what, I'll start with the point that I want your input on, because you're a man of the media, and I've been calling you for many years. I have this theory that, when in the media, whether you're left or right, particularly the print media, the more allies you have, they can often, not always, but often get you out of a sticky situation such as now. So in this instance, if you're a conservative, you lean on the more conservative-orientated press or media, whatever you want to call it, and if you're on the left, you'd obviously lean on them. And if that, for a second, I want your opinion on that, please, before I get into the main shtick of it. If that's even remotely true, one thing that has been very salient for me is the lack of support that's emanated for Rayner and her position from the Mirror, the Independent, the Observer, those sort of things. The only one I haven't seen is the Guardian, particularly when yesterday, columnists from the Mirror were coming out saying she's in deep, deep trouble, which I read quite correctly, I think, as being, they thought, this is edge of precipice stuff. So I don't know what you think about it.
Well, it's funny. You just quoted the very headline. I think it was the Mirror. I think they literally used the phrase "deep, deep trouble," didn't they? And I saw that as well, and I thought, well, that's interesting, because that's the Mirror. Now, the Mirror would ordinarily go for a Tory scalp. I thought it was quite telling, and I actually thought it was quite reassuring.
Fair enough. Well, like I said, that's where I've got. But let's just quickly get into it. A lot of the other material, some of your listeners, your commentators will have done far more articulate than I can. But one thing that I find particularly interesting is that when you had Priti Patel in trouble, albeit not quite to the same level, I don't recall her supporters or too many of media publications coming out and referencing the fact that she had an Asian background, and let's be honest, wasn't exactly born from a silver spoon. I'll get onto that in a second, because I think it's a broader point. But from her perspective, her hypocrisy, you've already pointed out, I think that's damning. But in particular, the fact that she is the deputy leader and deputy prime minister of a party and a man in Starmer who specifically campaigned, if you recall, I had conversations with you in 2023 about it, on an anti-sleaze ticket, basically using every opportunity to turn around and demarcate himself and his party away from the sleazy corrupt Tories, quote unquote. That is very damning. And isn't it also damning that she has come out here, the two aspects of what I'm about to say here. She has also come out here and basically said, oh, well, this was about tax planning, trying to provide for my disabled child. Not denying that. But this is the same government that has essentially lambasted farmers for trying to do the same thing to their children, and indeed has suggested inheritance tax needs to be looked at again, because, and in fairness to the government, not just them, but plenty of people who support them openly on the media have been saying, quote unquote, things like, you shouldn't be able to pass on things to your children. This is the problem with politicians, but in particular Rayner as a whole. And on that note, which I find frankly insufferable and cloying, one thing that I do note, and it's not, again, forgive me, I'll just briefly go into it because I'm not sure some of the listeners will be aware, it's not just Angela Rayner and her working class thing, because I don't know too many working class millionaires who are worth sort of over 4 million, but let's put that aside, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. But it always seems to be the left that uses these pathos-laden, ideas and stereotypes to push back against any critique or try to insulate themselves from criticism. Rayner with the working class, the woman stuff, over in America, for people who want to have a look at it, Lisa Cook, one of the prominent figures in economics, she has problems filling out her mortgage form. She's been accused of mortgage fraud. Letitia James, the woman that prosecuted Trump in New York, she also seems to have problems. It seems to be a common theme in the left, Ian, that either when they're going into government or senior positions, they seem to have bouts of amnesia, particularly when it comes to their financial affairs.
Do you think could it be then, Pav? I mean, this sounds a little bit over the top, maybe, but could it be that those on the left, when they think, shall I tick that box or shall I tick this box? I'll tick that one because, after all, I'm a lefty. Who's going to really think that I did this on purpose?
Well, I do, but I think that they think they're beyond the media glare.
Yeah, quite possibly.
And in particular, one of the things, I mean, that bubble bath with Beth Rigby was frankly ridiculous. And the more I think about it, I was listening to your show, listening to Julia's and even Mike's earlier, I think that was deeply cynical to go out because
100%.
The words are... I think it was basically she's afraid of getting copped for this, which a normal person would. But here's above everything else I've said, and no doubt other people will say, the one thing that's really damning in this, and you've pointed it out about the number of lawyers potentially she would have. Other people have spoken about it. Obviously, the responsibility is always the individual's, whatever a lawyer says, because nobody can force you to make a decision. But here's the thing: you can quite literally go onto the internet, and I checked this yesterday. There are not innumerable, but a plethora of websites which tell you how to calculate stamp duty owed. That's the problem. That's the damning thing. Now, unless she's then going to turn around and say her internet browser was broken or because she was working class origins, it's a problem. And that's the thing. And to answer your question, finally, you said, can she stay? I think she probably will because Starmer's quite weak.
Yep.
The real question is, should she stay? And I think the answer to that is an emphatic no.
There it is, Pav. A powerful point to finish on. Thank you very much indeed for that. Bit of breaking news. Italian fashion designer Giorgio Armani has died at the age of 91. You don't need me to educate you on the impact on the world of fashion, the high street and beyond of the man. But at 91, the age that he sadly put those Armani slippers on and gone to the great fashion cloud in the sky. It means Kevin O'Sullivan, who's not on air this week, had he been, he'd have dressed up in the full glitter jacket that I think he had personally made by Giorgio back in the 40s. Giorgio Armani dying at the age of 91. This is Talk.
She shouldn't she? She spent seemingly every day and every tweet calling for Conservatives to resign over far less egregious behaviour than this. She was part of a government that promised to be whiter than white, that was going to be transparent, do you remember that? And there were going to be higher standards. Now we've got a Prime Minister who says he's proud to sit beside a woman who has admitted that she didn't pay tens of thousands of pounds of tax when she purchased a home. I mean, we all know what she would have said and what the Prime Minister would have said.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes at 27 minutes after 2 from Kaz in Bedford, who says, I think Angie from Plymouth should join forces with Georgina. Two wonderful, forthright, articulate women with a common sense to bring up large, well-balanced families too. They could really give this government a run for their money. I've never been a Labour voter, but they remind me of the late, great Barbara Castle. At least she had principles. They don't make them like that anymore. She'd be turning in her grave at Angela Rayner. Yeah, Barbara Castle was absolutely the archetypal firebrand. She wasn't interesting. Loads of interesting facts about Barbara Castle. She was never rich. She wasn't working class. I think she came from pretty good stock. Rarely in her own constituency, which was Blackburn, as memory serves me. Jack Straw became the next MP there. But yeah, that certain turn of phrase and the ability to connect and be real and authentic, and that's what's been missing. You don't get Barbara Castles anymore. She predates me, by the way, Barbara Castle. I'm just doing this for a living, just aware of her work. Sue's down in London on Angela Rayner. What have you got for us, Sue? Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I had this interesting conversation with my husband this morning, who has been a lawyer for and has his own company for many years. And his bread and butter is conveyancing and, dealing with all this stuff. And he said that the government, Labour, Conservative first and Labour, they have so screwed everything so badly that it is actually so comprehensively impossible. The tax is so difficult that he said, and I quote, I don't like the woman, but it's probable that actually it's the people that advised her that are at fault and not her. And when he says that, and he's very forthright about who he likes and who he doesn't like, and who he trusts and who he doesn't trust, I tend to believe him. And again, it's not that I would, I don't think she, well, I'm not 100% sure that she deliberately has tried to defraud the tax man. But
that could be true, but of course that isn't the
government.
Yeah, but then she would still be liable, right? She's still liable for the mistake, even if.
Yes, 100%. No, but if she's been advised, if she is telling the truth that she was advised this way, then it's not her that's at fault. She's no lawyer. And it's not her, but her lawyer or her Katie, whoever it was that advised her, should be sued to high heaven.
Well, but that would be for her. But that would be for her to do, wouldn't it? She still carries the responsibility.
And I think she said that. If I have to pay it, I'll pay it.
Yeah.
But she's been advised badly, and I think it's a big problem.
Yeah, well, there's now sort of question marks over what was the original advice, and, either way, she's got a couple of other factors to deal with. One, she's the housing minister, and if anybody could have got advice, it would be her. And secondly, the fact that she would not be quite so generous to a Conservative if it was them, Sue, is probably
100%.
not a good look either, but I hear it. Sue, thank you very much indeed for that. Sue down in London. Adrian in Horsham, I think Nigel Farage, by going to America, has done something very clever that I don't think anyone has picked up on. Wasn't it only earlier this week that Nigel had warned Starmer that due to his disrespect of him as a fellow parliamentarian, he would destroy him? By doing what he's done, he certainly made Starmer's relationship with Trump very awkward, not least as Starmer's comment about free speech in Scotland a few weeks ago. Did Nigel Farage say he was going to destroy Keir Starmer? I mean, I'm sure he meant politically, obviously. I wasn't aware of that particular pinch point in the narrative, if you like, but thank you, Adrian, for that. And yeah, of course, it does show Starmer up magnificently in America, and I don't know if it weakens Israel. I don't think Trump really cares about any other leader, to be honest. But I think he'd care more about the Italian leader than he would about the UK leader. Let's put it that way. Maybe for obvious reasons. 0344 499 1000. And just a quick one from Tony. Nigel was not in America talking down GT, or that should be GB, I don't know, Great Britain. He was talking down the left government, says Tony. Fair point as well. Thank you for that. More from you on the way. Plus, we'll be talking about the Green Party's new leader claiming shoplifting could be justified if you're suffering a bit of poverty. Thoughts on that coming next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Kevin in Sheffield says, Angela Rayner, I'm going to go against popular opinion that she should resign or be sacked after listening to Alex Phillips and her guest last night about how far the tentacles of the Fabian Society stretch. I'm guessing she'll be saved. Look how easy the left-wing mainstream media have been on her. I think this investigation, or whatever they want to call it, will not come with the outcome that most common sense people believe. The Fabian Society, I believe, is the biggest problem in modern day society. To be honest, Kevin, I'm aware of the Fabian Society story. I think we had, it was Christine, I think, wasn't it, on Monday? Or was it Christine? I hope I'm not attributing that to the wrong caller. But somebody went big on the Fabian Society. Or was it last week on this show? Seems to have become a bit of an internet meme the last few days. It's a very tempting kind of... It's not even a conspiracy theory, really. It's just a kind of... almost they're just doing the work of the Fabian Society. And maybe, I mean, I think it'd be sort of very provable, and there's quite a lot of stuff that governments do that's very not Fabian in its extreme. So I don't read too much into the Fabian thing. However, I would say, and Pav pointed out, that the mainstream media, the left-wing media, have been quite harsh on Angela Rayner on this one as well. But I do agree with Kevin in Sheffield that I think she will survive. I believe that. Not that she should, but I believe she will, for all sorts of reasons. Maybe they are Fabian reasons. Now, the Green Party, talking about interesting parties, the Green Party's new leader claims that shoplifting can be justified for Brits living in poverty. This is Zach Polanski. A man is all shapes and sizes of interest, says those who steal because they have little money should be shown compassion, despite shoplifting costing retailers £4 billion a year. He's also attacked the justice system, accusing it of locking people up too often and too quickly. We might agree on the last point there. Let's speak with Matthew Barber, who's Police and Crime Commissioner for Thames Valley. Matthew, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I mean, this is often said, isn't it? You know, if you are, the archetypal single mother and want some nappies or some baby food, you shouldn't really be sent to Holloway for doing that. But I don't think largely when we're talking about shoplifting, that's really what we're talking about.
No, I think we would find that as a tiny minority, if at all.
Correct.
The people who see shoplifting in our streets are drug addicts stealing to feed their habits. They are parts of organised crime gangs. They are those who are selling those goods on. Just in Reading, in the last week, Thames Valley Police broke a ring of people who'd stolen £21,000 of goods from local stores and were selling those on. These are not people who are struggling to feed their family. These are criminals, and it's quite right that the public that should expect the police to deal with them. What I think what the Green leader is missing is, of course, this huge disservice to many people in our country who are genuinely really struggling to pay the bills, to feed their families, and they don't resort to crime because they're good, decent people who know right from wrong, and they will seek to do what they can to support the family. And it's right that we should expect a system that supports people who are at their lowest ebb. And we have a strong network of food banks and local authorities and charities who will support people. It is not an excuse to resort to crime. The sorts of things that people have experienced on the street is often where shoplifting becomes violent, and shop staff can be the victims of that. This is not an acceptable response. The vast majority of people who are shoplifting in this country are doing it for criminal gain. It's greed, nothing more, nothing less. We shouldn't give people an excuse.
100%. And it's also, as you alluded to there, Matthew, in your answer, it's a huge libel on working class people or people who haven't got any. You know, I grew up in a working class house with very little money. I mean, the idea that my mum or dad would go out shoplifting to try and feed us is more than a little patronising, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm well aware of plenty of people across Thames Valley, across the country, who are genuinely really struggling, where they're struggling to try and do the right thing. And I think if you're in the supermarket, having struggled, worked hard to feed your family, doing often more than one job, and you're there deciding what you can afford or can't afford to put in your basket, and you see someone comes up alongside you and just steals something, I think, can you imagine how bad that feels when you are struggling yourself and someone else is just taking what they want? It is unacceptable. And frankly, it harms the worst off in society, not just big corporations.
Indeed. Just give us a final point, Matthew. Give us an idea of what you guys are doing in Thames Valley. Your neck of the woods isn't immune from this same, what seems to be almost an epidemic of shoplifting. Perhaps it's been fuelled and increased because there's been so many social media posts of people doing it without getting caught. A copper doesn't show up. There's real difficulties there. What's happening in Thames Valley to try and tackle this?
Well, I mentioned already £21,000 of stolen goods seized by the police this week in Reading. This morning, before I joined you, I was in Oxford earlier today talking to retailers and security firms working with the police to tackle, identify prolific offenders, tackle them, make sure the police do attend when they're called, but make sure we gather the evidence. And we've improved the reporting of retail crime in Thames Valley, and that's why the number of charges for shoplifting in Thames Valley have doubled since we started that new approach. Of course, we still have problems to deal with, but it's about making a hostile environment for criminals and saying this is not acceptable here, and the police will bear down on those criminals.
100%. Matthew, thank you for your time, sir. Matthew Barber is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Thames Valley. I mean, this is happening en masse, isn't it, shoplifting? And it's happening because clearly criminals are emboldened. They're emboldened by the idea that the security guard is not likely to stop them in the shop. They're often masked up, although interestingly, not exclusively masked up. Even if they were stopped, are you going to get a police officer out to come and nab you because you nicked some pies and some beer or whatever? Probably not. Criminals also taking advantage of the fact that the police are really stretched, the court systems are stretched, and the prison system is stretched as well. So it's kind of perfect storm to be a criminal at the moment, and shoplifting is very easy pickings. And we know it's not about people just nabbing some baby milk. Industrial scale theft happening on a very regular basis. I don't know how it got relegated to a minor crime, not even a crime at all in some respects. People are getting away with it left, right and centre, and is the only way to throw the book at them. the single mother stealing milk to feed her baby because she has no money. I'm sure there is an example of that somewhere. I believe it's largely apocryphal, and you know, if it did exist, then in very, very small numbers. That's not all we're talking about. We're mostly talking about horrible, nasty oiks who go out nicking stuff because they can't be asked to go to work. This is Jenny in Surrey. On Angela Rayner. Jenny, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just phoning on behalf of the majority of women who, through no fault of their own, found themselves as single parents after the breakup of a marriage or what have you. Yeah. I brought up 2 children, one with a very, very severe illness and the other still severe but less so. I went to work. I bought my house. It was a massive, massive thing. I paid full everything. And I need to tell you, there are thousands of women all over the country, and we're all doing it for ourselves. We don't have unions behind us. We don't have any leg ups. I came from a very working class family. Mm-hmm. And I just want to send a message to Angela Rayner. Big Ange, put your big girl knickers on. Done. You have put women like us to shame. I would never consider fiddling the taxman. If anything, I work for the NHS and the opposite was true. But I never embarrassed myself or anybody around me by behaving in such a dastardly and underhand way. And I want to apologise to all the other single mothers in the country who don't make a fuss, who just get on with it.
So you're not buying, Anne-Marie, sorry, Jenny, you're not buying the excuse that she didn't know what she'd done?
No. She has the very best legal advice.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? I mean, it's a bit extraordinary.
Think, oh, come on. I mean, for God's sake, she's got the Attorney General on her side. I mean, dear God, what excuse
she could have run the numbers past any number of people, probably the bloke that works in the desk opposite her, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I scrimped and saved to get my local solicitor who got me through. I had no tax breaks, and thousands of women in our situation, really struggling, have no help whatsoever. She's got the unions, she's got Keir Starmer. I mean, I expect he's really helpful. Yeah. She's got that lovely Richard III. I mean, she's got a whole team. And she's got that nice chap who, no, was he a solicitor? No, sorry, he wasn't.
Maybe it was him that gave the advice.
Perhaps that was it.
It could have come from Reynolds. Who knows? We will see.
I mean, to be quite honest, I just think she is shameful and she is shameless.
Mm.
She has, you know... Sorry, my dog's in the background.
That's all right. Don't worry. The dog sounds fabulous as well, as did you. Jenny, it was a very powerful call as well. Thank you very much indeed for the plea you gave to other women in your situation as well, and your own lived experience on this too. That was Jenny in Surrey. Let's go to Anne-Marie in Lanarkshire. On Angela Rayner, can she survive this one? Anne-Marie, what do you think? Good afternoon.
Well, it wouldn't be very good look for the Labour Party if she does survive. But I would like to say that she's not just a working class housewife or a woman, a mother. She's a deputy prime minister, right? Yeah. Her brief is housing. If she's not across buying a house for herself, how can she be across the housing brief? She takes advice from the lawyer. The lawyers really should be taken to book here. How many other people have they advised to do the tax man of money? That must be looked at. But she has, I mean, this is her brief. This isn't just an ordinary woman. This has to be taken a lot more serious.
The bar is, you know, it's a bit like police officers or politicians. The bar is higher in terms of those jobs. It kind of has to be for obvious reasons.
Well, she's on housing. I mean, that's her job.
I mean, you can't. Every time you've just said it, I've said it a number of times. It's almost like, you really couldn't make that up, could you? The housing minister has been collared in a stamp
really
duty.
Does have to be removed. And I don't
It's
think
just
Farmer
bizarre.
can remove her. It has to be the Labour Party because it was them that put her in there. And, I mean, what would happen if she had to take over the country if she couldn't even run up her own...
Yeah, well, I don't think she... I mean, maybe, as somebody said earlier, Keir Starmer might keep her in position because it actually, she would be weakened and therefore becomes less of a threat to him.
I mean, it's about the country, it's not about Keir Starmer.
No, I know. I mean, he always says country first, party second. That is BS, frankly.
Right. Well, it just doesn't ring true with Keir Starmer. He's just a bloody liar. OK, thank you.
He speaks well of you, Anne-Marie. Thank you very much indeed for that. This one from Brendan. In my tax investigation, the taxman made it quite clear that ignorance of the tax law is no defence. I do find that, not just in tax, in all sorts of areas, like buying your TV licence and not realising that just because you had a laptop, you didn't think you needed you know, that kind of... They've got ignorance is no defence. I mean, you might think a good lawyer would go, do you know what? Sometimes ignorance could be a defence, right? There might genuinely be, especially when it comes to complex areas like taxation and stuff, where you either, you know, you're asked to do something that is quite convoluted. You don't have to have an accountant. You could do it yourself. Someone, I'm sure, in HMRC would advise you to get an accountant, so you get an accountant purely because you can't do it yourself, and when the accountant gets it wrong or a solicitor gets it wrong, that is no defence for what happened. You carry the can, and that's... I don't know how else it could be, but it sounds bloody harsh if you genuinely made a minor error. As our previous caller did and found himself having a £25,000 backlog of tax doubled in penalties by the tax people. 0344 499 1000. Voice of Doom, day 2, coming next.
Trying to find out why she didn't tell that firm what happened in relation to her disposal of Ashton. And, you know, look, the stamp duty rules are complicated. The particular rule that we're talking about, the one that's hurt Angela in question, it's a deeming rule. It's an anti-avoidance rule, ironically. It's pretty obscure. It wouldn't be at the front of mind of any high street conveyancer if a high street conveyancer was used. But nevertheless, relying on legal advice in isolation isn't normally a defence.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 10 to 3. We'll talk to Robert and Norman in just a second. Some great calls coming up. Voice of Doom, Day 3. This is the mystery voice. It's a politician you're looking for, as always with these things. Day 2 of this one. Who is this?
Every area of the country.
Let's hear it again.
Every area of the country.
Now, I know I say this every time. I think that's an absolute stinker. Yesterday, people couldn't work out whether it was a male voice or a female voice. So there was that as well. I'm not giving any clues after what happened last time. Here it is again.
Every area of the country.
Someone will know, but I've got a sense that's going to go on forever. 87222. Don't phone on this, just message. And as I always say, if we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news. If we don't, it rolls over to tomorrow. 87222. Here it is again.
Every area of the country.
If you think you know. Back to your calls. Robert in Hertfordshire. Reference Angela Rayner. Robert, what's going on? Good afternoon.
Yeah, well, I reckon she's the mystery voice. Change.
Maybe it is her after all.
No, right, before I go into my point about, which is to do with dissolving this government and calling a general election immediately, I've got a little 4-line ditty that I wrote about. It's only 4 lines. Can I say it to you?
Is it clean?
Oh, it's clean, yeah.
OK. Fire away.
Yeah. Right, Angela Rayner, it couldn't be plainer. Welcome to Karma. Next up is Starmer.
I like it. That's almost haiku-esque with one extra line.
I was going to try and start it, a gobby redhead from Brighton. I couldn't think of anything to rhyme with Brighton.
Frighten.
Oh, yeah, that's not bad. Yeah,
that would have been, yeah, you'd have crowbarred that in there, or Mighton.
Right, before I go on to my point, I owe you a bottle of beer. We had a bet, didn't we? I said Starmer would be out by the end of the summer. It's the end of the summer, and I was wrong.
Is it officially the end of the summer yet, though, Robert?
Well, you tried to tell me the end of the summer was about May. When we first had...
Well, you see, I'm one of those people that thinks we had a really bad summer in terms of weather.
Well, yeah,
and everyone goes, what are you talking about? No, just because it didn't rain doesn't mean it's a good summer.
No, that's true. Right, getting on to our point,
yeah.
I mean, enough's enough now. And I think you've got a responsibility as a responsible journalist and a very respected one. You should be changing the narrative with your chums in Fleet Street to call for an election. This should be it now. I mean, enough is enough. When you've got the Deputy Prime Minister, you know, she can squirm as much as she likes. Yeah. I don't believe it. She'd be lucky to get away without being nicked, to be honest with you. But I don't really want to see her getting nicked. And when you start playing the disabled child card, I mean, you really are struggling.
But isn't that... I mean, I know what you're saying. David Cameron was often accused of that, and I thought unfairly accused of that, by the way. But is it... I mean, you know, she's allowed to change the terms of her previous house, right? She can put it into a trust. She's allowed to do that. That's not illegal. What is illegal is not recognising the status of that arrangement and the tax implications that followed.
Well, no, I mean, with her, like anybody, if they're nice and they're nice and not gobby like she was, you know, there's a lot what people can get away with because the public like them. I mean, you know, it's karma, plain and simple. Like my poem said, it's karma. I can't feel one bit sorry for her, and she should be falling on her sword. She shouldn't wait to be sacked. She should fall on her sword. All I keep hearing this morning is, I've met her, she's a nice person. Not interested. Yeah. Not interested.
Being a nice person is not, again, that's definitely not a defence in law. Robert, thank you very much indeed for that. It's funny how, I'm trying to think what Labour's first scandal was, who the first person to go was. Happens every time. I remember when Blair came in, it was going to be so squeaky clean. And then one of his front bench ministers was caught on Clapham Common, shall we say, I don't know what he was doing, but I think he was tickling Yoda behind the ears. And that was seen as not a very good thing to do at 4 o'clock in the morning. So he had to walk the plank. And then there was the, you know, tobacco kind of F1 thing. Norman's in Dartford. Norman, what have you got for us?
Good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
I don't think people should lose sight of the fact that Angela Rayner had instant access to some of the finest legal advice in the country, free of charge.
Yeah, I keep making this point, Norman. It's extraordinary.
And she chose not to do it. Now, why?
Yeah, why? I mean, why are you not... By the way, I still don't understand, if you're a senior cabinet minister, why are you not compelled to do it? To run it past a kind of the cabinet office lawyers or something. Somebody goes, right, you're doing a house transaction, you can't do that because of your job, you can't do that without going here. In the same way that if you work for MI6 or MI5, Norman, you can't suddenly, book yourself onto a TUI holiday with your real name.
Yeah, but that could be the rules, but she's totally ignored it. Presumably, if you had half a brain, you'd never... you'd use the best advice you've got.
You'd think so.
For nothing.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Yeah, you'd think so. So, but that's a crime of idiocy, isn't it?
It doesn't add up.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
I got involved in something like this I worked for the civil service when we got privatised, and everybody worried about their pension.
Yeah.
So I contacted the government and said, "Who can we get someone to explain it to us?" And they sent over a bloke, I think he's from the House of Lords, was an actuary. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know what an actuary was.
Actually?
Yeah, someone who's an expert in pension and that sort of thing. And anyway, this bloke comes in and he starts explaining, well, God knows, he was explaining words I didn't even know, and I knew my mates wouldn't know. So I said, can you explain to me in English, in that language we understand, what we're entitled to? And it was all to do with the 2p regulations.
The 2p?
Yeah, that's to do with this. When we was in the European Union,
right?
If you got privatised, they had to continue with exactly the same privileges.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. So it was down to that, and it was to protect us. And this bloke told us chapter and verse exactly what we was allowed, the government was allowed to do, new people were allowed to do to us, and what they wasn't.
Listen, Norman, I have to step in there. I think you got the bulk of it out on air for us. Thank you very much indeed for that. We're about to hit the clock. Here's the latest voice of doom.
Every area of the country.
Who is that? 03444991000. Back after the news at 3.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And it continues. The plot thickens, of course, around Angela Rayner. Good afternoon, by the way. Welcome back to the home of common sense. Her seaside flat, by the way, the one that's at the centre of all of this in Hove, was vandalised last night with graffiti all over it, calling her a tax evader. No one thinks that's a good look. You know, that's not a cool thing to do, all right? However, the overarching issue has not gone away, and that is whether or not she deliberately underpaid stamp duty. In fact, whether she did or not doesn't absolve her from any blame on this one. Can she survive? I think that's the big question here. There's a lot of pressure for her to resign, and some say there should be a general election, as we've just been hearing. Can she seriously survive this? We'll have more comment from you on the way. Also this afternoon, Nigel Farage has told the US Congress that any American visiting Britain could be the next Graham Linehan, warning that no one is safe from regulators and police over their social media posts, with the, quote, authoritarian UK now comparable to North Korea, he said. What did you make of that? We'll have more of that and comment from you. And Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick has backed Reform UK's plan for mass deportations, calling for a decade of net emigration to give Britain breathing space after years of record immigration. That sounds very plausible, very sensible. We'll talk to a couple of guests on this in a few moments' time. Details to come. 0344 499 1000. Before we go any further, let's just do the voice of doom. This, of course, is the mystery voice with a political edge. The question is, who is this?
Every area of the country.
These are some of the guests. Kirsty Allsop, not really a politician. Liz Truss, no. So it's got a little bit of Truss going on there. Sam Armstrong, no. Amber Rudd, Ron Jeremy. Ron Jeremy once came in on James Whale's show, by the way. It was the most extraordinary thing. I seem to remember he spent a lot of time in the toilets. Ash will tell the story better. But he spent a lot of time, I think I don't want to... Can I libel Ron Jeremy? He's in jail at the moment, isn't he? I think he was hoovering, let's put it that way. Is he going to sue me? That would be awful if he did. Ofcom, please understand me. He's a porn star that was punching above his weight every day he went to work. So he deserves a bit of ribbing. That's not a porn phrase. Steve Baker, no. David Cameron, no. Anne Widdecombe, it is not. Alicia Kearns, not Keynes. No. Harriet Harman, no. Natalie Bennett, it is not. Kit Johnson is not. Can we hear the voice again, Sam?
Every area of the country.
Nobody has got it right. It rolls over tomorrow for day 3. Stand by for that. 3:05. So let's go to that Robert Jenrick story. I think this is rather interesting for obvious reasons. Robert Jenrick, a Conservative, is backing Nigel Farage's plans for mass deportation, calling for a decade of net emigration. The Shadow Justice Secretary says more people leaving than arriving would give Britain breathing space after record immigration. The comments come as a migrant from the Solomon Islands who sexually assaulted a 17-year-old girl in Dorset has avoided prison and thanked Britain, saying the British are looking after me. Accommodation, food, I can give the whole lot benefit. Thank you. That's how it was said. I appreciate Great Britain for looking after me. I don't even know where to start on that, but it does give you just one of many countless examples of what is wrong with our system. We're going to be speaking in a moment to Lord Craig McKinley on this Conservative peer, but first Nick Buckley is with us, former mayoral candidate in Manchester and author. Nick's new book, Anglophobia, A Price Worth Paying to Be English, is out now. Good to have you with us again, Nick. This seems like fairly logical stuff from Reform, but interesting that a Conservative has backed it.
Yes, but let's backtrack a little bit. Even though Reform have said this isn't Reform leading the political establishment. This isn't Reform leading the country. This is Reform catching up to the people. It was only 6 months ago Nigel Farage was saying this cannot be done. I'm not going down this path. We're not deporting people. It can't be done. It can't be done. I'm telling you, Ian, it can't be done. That was 6 months ago. But the country's moved on. The Overton windows has dramatically changed direction. So reform now have caught up with the people. Fantastic, 100%. I agree. Now the Tories are thinking we need to catch up with the people. I'm not sure the Tories have enough MPs to want this policy. I think Genevieve is a lot. Whether or not you believe him or not is a different thing altogether. But he's saying the right things, but I don't think his party, his MPs, want this. I think the members do, but the MPs don't.
Yeah.
The people have spoken, and politicians are now trying to catch up to where the people are.
And I guess, and obviously we'll speak to Craig McKinley in just a moment, of course now a Conservative peer, but previously a Conservative MP. I mean, obviously immigration did grow under the Conservatives. Nobody can dispute that. Some would say it's because, and I'll put this point to Craig as well, some would say, look, it's in the Conservatives' DNA to be kind of pro-immigration. That's always been their position. They've never been a party that has sought to take the reform kind of line. So this is an interesting turn of events from Robert Jenrick, but one that many people, you've just kind of alluded to it, Nick, many people just either won't believe or certainly don't think could happen anyway.
No one's going to believe anything the Tories say for the next few years. And no one's ever going to believe any Tory who was ever in government over the 14 years of the last Tory government. Those people are tarnished. Those people need to go. What Kemi Badenoch needs to be doing now is looking for the new leaders, the new people who are not tainted by those 14 years of being traitors, actually. And then they need to hand over power to them. That's the only way to save the Tory party, because they're done, they're dusted. Even I hate them.
If they made enough noise about this, if Kemi Badenoch was on board with, and again, it's that word which for many people, Nick, is uncomfortable, words, mass deportation, you know, for many that has some unfortunate connotations. The Tories wouldn't usually use that kind of language. If they did, and they were shouting this from the rafters, could their fortunes be turned around?
Yes and no. So yes, I'll make a promise now. This is the direction the Tories are going to go into over the next 5-10 years. It's written in stone. But anybody connected to the last 14 years will not be leading the Tory party to success. The Tory party, if they verbalise some of this, which Genevic's doing all the time, and he sounds great doing it, if he carries on doing that, they may damage reform, because they'll stop the leaking of Tory voters to the reform base, but they can't win. Their reputation's in the gutter. Yeah. They need new leaders. They need new MPs.
Nick, on that point, great to have you on with us. Thank you very much. Nick Buckley, MP, MBE, I should say, author, and Nick's book is out now. In fact, it'd be worth getting on for Nick for a chat just on the specifics of his book, by the way, all about Anglophobia. We'll have more details on that. A price worth paying to be English. There it is. You can see the cover on your screen. Let's speak with Lord Craig McKinley, Conservative peer, former MP over there in Thanet South. You know what it's like to be a coastal MP in Kent, Craig, which is where the coalface of this story of immigration emanates from, of course. Good afternoon to you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to be on. Good to be on, Ian.
In terms of...
I'm sorry that Nick was so annoyed with us, really.
Yeah, he thought you're done and dusted, frankly.
I know, just a little bit of historical context. I mean, the old Tories were a loose political association from the 1670s, formalised a bit more into a Conservative Party in 1834. We've been around a long time.
Yeah.
We are a very good party at eventually, and I must say sometimes we've been a bit slow off the mark, of reading the country. I mean, I would say Brexit is a classic one. I mean, I came back to the Conservative Party in 2005, having been one of the founders of the UK Independence Party, because the Conservative Party was changing. It became a bit more normal to start talking about the European Union. And hey presto, in the end, with a bit of a shove, from myself once I was elected as an MP and others. We got that referendum, and it was the Conservative Party that actually delivered something that people thought was really impossible only 10 years before. And I think we will see that change in many of these, what I call common sense policies. And I know Talk Radio is founded on common sense. We will come to our senses on many of these things, and immigration will certainly be one of them.
Is it too late, though? And can you imagine the likes of Kemi Badenoch standing there publicly on TV debates or interviews saying, we need mass deportations now? I mean, that language for some is not particularly conservative.
Well, what I want is mass adherence to the law. And that is all we're looking for, is mass adherence to the law, and mass adherence to the law of coming into the country with an appropriate visa, because there are three types of immigrant types, shall we say. You have those that are coming on the boats completely irregularly, and that seems to be the focus of our mind at the moment, because that is really, really annoying people, because they can feel that people are having a better time when they've come across in a regular dinghy than they're actually having themselves paying the taxes and doing the right thing in the UK. For the first time, I think people are really feeling that the cost of this is now out of control. So that's one type of immigrants. The second one, and this is causing concern, are the totally legal migrants that have been given a work visa, many of them to work in care or whatever other industries. And people are seeing their communities changing very, very, very rapidly within just a few years. And that was on the back of what many people call the Boris wave and all the rest of it. I'm not proud to have been part of that government that was allowing that to happen. I didn't see it really coming in those numbers, but coming they most certainly were. But the third one, and I think this is more where the legality is coming in, and what I think Robert is referring to, and I think Kemi will stand on the shore saying the same thing, is if you've got student visas. So people come over for a student visa, they do their course, and then they disappear into the country.
Yeah.
And they never seen again, they do not leave. Now, these are pure illegals. They came in on a contract for a number of years to do their course, and they then disappear, or they come in for a family funeral or whatever other reason to come and visit the UK on a holiday or for family reasons, and they then disappear into the underground economy. These are illegal people. It wouldn't be entertained if you and I turned up in Thailand with your 30-day visa and just disappeared into Thailand. You would be found one day and you would be deported.
100%.
We wouldn't be using this as mass deportation, horrible language. It would happen in any other country on this planet, but seemingly in the UK, we have been far too soft on just adhering to the law of the land, and that is a contract of your visa, it's expired, you go home.
And you might think that, you mentioned at the beginning, Craig, that this is almost about the Conservative Party playing catch-up on this, and that it's happened before with Brexit. But of course, as we alluded to with our previous guest, Nick, there's a lot of Conservatives that wouldn't go near a policy like this, because not because they're necessarily lily-livered secret lefties, but they believe that being a Conservative involves embracing some of this.
Well, I think we have done that for very many years. I mean, this country's got a massive record across many centuries of looking after those that are displaced from war zones around the world. We had the French, many French came over. Where I sort of live at times in Rochester, there is a French community that is the remnant of those times when they were ejected. We got a Jewish community that was ejected. But these were numbers accounting into their sort of 5s or 10s or maybe 20,000. You had the Ugandan Asians. Again, just a number of tens of thousands. What we've seen over the last few years is not a few tens of thousands that we absorb and they become British and you wouldn't even know the difference of what passport people hold. This is a mass number in a very, very short time, and people can see before their eyes, that the cultural differences are becoming very, very apparent. Yeah. So I think it's a question of speed and rapidity, and it has been too fast and too rapid. I think most people, even what you might call the lily-livered lefties within the Conservative Party, I think even they can see that this was never the right plan. It got out of hand very quickly, and a government or a Conservative party that has been party of government for longer than any other, is well placed to put this right. We've done things a bit wrong in that last 5 to 10 years. I know COVID did such damage. I don't think we quite realised that it damaged so much across benefits, across worklessness. There was a scar left in the country, and I think there's a bit of that in immigration as well, that we just haven't quite got on track like other countries.
Yeah, spot on. Listen, Craig, you've been great as always. Just very briefly, before we let you go, you might have seen this story that parliamentary authorities are investigating after a mobile phone was planted in the Commons to play sex noises during PMQs. The prank apparently targeting Starmer and Badenoch, essentially. The device was discovered in a routine security sweep before the session. Could have been very embarrassing.
Well, yeah, you have to have a fair old volume because there's quite a lot of noise in the chamber for PMQs.
True.
But yes, it does indicate some security problems, but anyone who's been around the estate can see before PMQ particularly, and actually before any session of Parliament, there is a huge security sweep. So what was meant to happen has happened. It's been found. So I think we can sleep safely in beds. But
I don't know where it was, because to get into the actual chamber, that's quite tricky to do if you're not a member of Parliament. I was in the press gallery. Even, press aren't allowed into the chamber. We go in the press gallery bit, of course, as you know. So to be able to get in there and do that if it was the chamber would be a breach of security, wouldn't it?
Well, not at all. I mean, you've got school children going in and out.
If you're on a tour, I see what you're saying.
Everything else. I mean, there's tours every weekend, mornings before Parliament sits. Yeah, very regular. There are probably many tens of thousands of people go through that chamber on an annual basis, and that's the reason that there is a very substantial security sweep with machines and dogs every single day.
Listen, Craig, great to have you on. Thank you, Lord Craig McKinley, Conservative peer, former Conservative MP for Thanet South. Thank you to him. Can the Tories learn from this, which is what he was alluding to? There's lessons to be learned, and they can turn it around and, essentially own the narrative on immigration. I just honestly don't believe the Conservatives can snatch the immigration narrative from reform. They might be able to snatch, I don't know, an economic one or a defence one if they did their homework and played their cards right. I can't imagine they could ever park their tanks on reform's lawn when it comes to immigration. I mean, Nigel Farage has represented and trumpeted this very theme for a couple of decades. Is Kemi Badenoch really going to come and steal a march on Farage when it comes to this specific issue? I don't see it. I don't see it because it's not true. One is don't let Nick Buckley get away with factual inaccuracies. 6 months ago, Nigel Farage disagreed with Rupert Lowe, who wanted to deport entire communities, including those born here, very different to current reform policy. That is kind of true. That's certainly what's being said now, that when Farage said it, he was referring to Rupert Lowe's idea. But he could have put a caveat in there, couldn't he, at the time, and gone, I disagree with Rupert Lowe that you can't get rid of entire communities. However, you can still have mass deportations. And I think that's where some of the criticism of Nigel has come in. That said, any politician is allowed to refine their policy. He said it now. He said what they stand for, and it's quite clear. 0344 499 1000. Back with more calls from you coming next on Talk.
good morning to you, by the way. Morning, Glory, with me, Mike Graham.
Just some breaking news for you coming out of Liverpool Crown Court.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Steve says, I like Craig McKinley, we just spoke with, but he inadvertently showed the issue with the Conservatives. Irregular migration on boats. Really? It's illegal. Get a grip. I did clock that as he said it as well, Steve. But I think he thought he was using it in a different context, because bearing in mind, Steve is former UKIP. He's not exactly a guy that would, he's not scared to use the right language, but it did, yeah, because that's always a clunky old phrase, isn't it, when they start saying irregular migration. This from Martin, who says, bad legal advice, reference Angela Rayner, an excuse did not save Lucy Connolly. It's a good point. Simon in Bray, as an ex-estate agent, I do not know one single solicitor that would not know that she would have had to pay extra stamp duty if she genuinely got advice from 3 lawyers. Maybe they should be in the dock for false advice that they gave. There was a piece in the Telegraph this morning that was written about exactly this, where a guy said, it's not the if you buy a second home, you pay more stamp duty. That isn't the bit that was. It's if you have a trust, if your previous house is in a trust where you don't have ownership of it, you can't sell it, it's not therefore a first home, and you are not the trust is the ownership. It's that bit that's the convoluted bit. And when you dip your nose into the trust trough and start looking at the legislation, apparently, I'm just reiterating what we've been told, that's the bit that gets convoluted, because some people with a trust won't have to pay stamp duty on a second home. Some people would. Blah, blah, blah. Something like that. Pat's down in London. Pat, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
Oh, good afternoon, Ian. Beforehand, you had a bloke phone you and say, like, about a general election, which is fine, which is not a bad idea, but, even if we had a general election, say, in the next 3 months, well, the Conservatives are still sort of trying to get back on the boat, like, after being capsized.
Yep.
And Reform haven't got enough MPs to sort of, like, go that early. I mean, it's not their time. So, and your researcher said, well, what would you do? So I explained to him that I think because this is such an emergency, I think the King has to get involved and summon him to the palace or wherever he's at the moment and have a good talk to say, look, the course you're on, Mr. Starr or Sir Keir, is not the right course. You've got to reverse it. You've got to start encouraging millionaires and investment into this country. You've got to start, not taxing all the, what they've taxed and all this, farmers and all that. You've got to reverse everything and start getting investment in this country, because I'm talking about as if I was King Charles. I don't want my country to go to the IMF. I don't want to rule over a broken kingdom. Now, you either get your finger out, or I'm going to maybe go through some archaic law that's been long forgotten in the statute books and get you out, you and your government out. So what will it be? You know, I'm serious about this. But I don't think he ever will, because I don't think he's that kind of person. But if I was King Charles, I'd have him there and say, you've got to reverse everything you've done.
Yep.
And you've got to get rid of Reeves. You've got to get somebody in, even if it's a captain of industry that's never been elected. You've got to get somebody in to reverse all this.
Do you think, though, I mean, that would be like a, never been seen before thing, wouldn't it? That a government is going to literally change. I mean, that would just be an argument for a different party, wouldn't it, really?
Yeah, but that's the only way. If he starts kicking some butt and starts saying, look, we've got to get out, because otherwise we ain't going to get elected next time.
Yep.
We've got to change. Look, it doesn't hurt to change strategy.
I agree. It doesn't hurt, but I don't know how much strategy you can change without ceasing to become the government.
Seeking investment and wealthy people and start opening up Britain and start making it like we ain't going to tax the mega rich. We're going to let them. We're going to let them thrive and business.
No, I agree, but then that is you're right, but none of that, Pat, is in the DNA of Labour, of course, and that would be a case of having a completely different party. Listen, Pat, I absolutely hear the notion of what you're saying. Thank you very much indeed for that. Gary is in Leicester. I want to get a word in from Gary before we break. What are your thoughts, Gary?
Well, the one thing that I'm surprised nobody's picked up is that Miss Rayner, she's what's known as a PEP, a politically exposed person. Financial Conduct Authority, we'll struggle to get that out, require that any firm dealing with somebody like that goes through, in their words, enhanced anti-money laundering checks to protect both the politician and the lender. So anybody out... Yeah, and it's a big deal, because she's rocked up, this is in the public domain, with 160k cash deposit.
Yep.
Now, I used to be a financial advisor and a mortgage advisor, and the first question you ask is, what's the deposit? 160, where's that from? And I normally would be, I've sold a property. Great. But if you said, it's in my bank account, well, I tell you what, there's going to be some checks. And if you said, which is what the facts are, that, well, what I've done is I've sold 25% of my property to a trust that's been established to protect my disabled child, any advisor and any firm would go, I tell you what, we can do this. It's going to take a while and we might want to be taking advice. So the whole thing is not quite hanging together. They're drip feeding us.
I mean, she's allowed to do that bit, isn't she? She's allowed to the bit about selling the truck. I mean, that's not illegal.
Yeah. No, and I feel uncomfortable that it's a child situation's been dragged into the public domain, but she brought it in, and when you find that there's a big lump of money that came from the NHS and all that, I can see why she didn't really want to get involved.
Yeah.
But she's done nothing wrong there. It don't look very good. I'll be honest with you, moving 5.5 hours away from your disabled child. But hey, who am I to judge?
Go on.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it. Who is any of us to judge? However, she is the Deputy Prime Minister, of course. That means she is responsible, and it also means that she is held to a higher account, I think, than most people. And, of course, as we all know, and thank you, Gary, for your call, even if it turned out, she did get some iffy advice, and she followed it. Turned out she then followed it up, but kind of followed it up after it all came out. And was told, no, you do need to pay the extra money. She is responsible, regardless of whether she got advice to the contrary. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 4. Let's just move to this story. A woman who's been dubbed the ketamine queen has pleaded guilty to supplying that drug that killed Friends star Matthew Perry. Josephine Sanga, a US-UK dual citizen, admitted 5 charges in federal court, including distribution of ketamine resulting in death. She now faces up to 65 years in prison for her role in the actor's death. Let's speak now. For more on this story, Scarlett Howes, US correspondent at The Sun. Scarlett, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Hello.
This is not clearly a little small-time dealer that once in a while knew a bloke who knew a bloke and you sent him a text and he biked around a bit of Class A's for you. This was somebody that was clearly very significant in this world.
Yes, I mean, she was extremely. She grew up very wealthy, as you said. She's a US dual national, British background. She grew up in Calabasas, as we know. That's an incredibly wealthy part of Los Angeles. And she marketed herself publicly on social media as this kind of jet-setting, luxurious, glamorous woman who would hang out with celebrities like Charlie Sheen and so forth. And privately, she also marketed herself as that, but with another side of her personality, which was a drug dealer to high-end clients, to the stars, as kind of what she put out there. Now, it's quite. I think everybody thought that she would have her day in court because she took quite a while to enter into a plea deal. So she was in custody since last August. She's been in custody since last August, and all signs are pointing to her to prove her innocence in court. But last month she signed a plea deal, and yesterday she admitted 5 counts of federal charges, including the being responsible for the dose that ultimately killed Matthew Perry.
Wow. I mean, this is serious stuff. What is it? I mean, the plea deal thing. So the plea deal that she only gets 65 years in jail. I mean,
no. So it's quite confusing. So the maximum amount that she could get for these charges is 65 years. However, that's quite misleading because she's not going to, experts here say she's not going to get that. She's going to get probably about 10 to 15 years in jail because she wouldn't have accepted a plea deal if she wasn't going to reduce her sentence.
Well, right, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yes. It's still a significant, just a significant amount of time, but it's a huge fall from a lifestyle for somebody, as you rightly say, had dined out unimpeded, rubbing shoulders with the good and the great, the best restaurants, I'm sure, fast cars and pool parties and goodness knows what. This is a big old fall for somebody like her.
Oh yeah, completely. And I mean, what's really interesting as well is that, the prosecutors say in court, and court documents say that, they allege that she actually knew that her ketamine was dangerous because in 2019, a man actually died who they say was supplied ketamine by her. So she kind of, she knew what she was doing. And I think that she thought that there were going to be no consequences because she was doing it for so many years. And when police raided her home, they found, a vast amounts of ketamine and other types of drugs. They actually called it a drug emporium.
Wow.
So it's on a massive scale. It's not just like a dealer that's down the road. This is
I was going to say, I mean, is that the biggest offence? Is the big offence that she just had a lot of, to coin the phrase, a lot of gear in her house, and therefore was a big time drug dealer? Or is the fact that it resulted in the sad death of Matthew Perry is awful? Some would say, well, that's terrible, but that's not her fault. It's, the fault of people who take drugs, although you've just suggested there that perhaps she knew that there was something wrong with the kind of quality of what she was selling. So would she be imprisoned as a drug dealer? Would she be imprisoned as somebody who was ultimately responsible for someone's death?
Well, I think that it's ultimately someone who responsible for someone's death. But, these charges, so it's maintaining a drug-involved premises, 3 counts of distribution of ketamine, which is a drug dealer distribution, and 1 count of distribution of ketamine resulting in death. Now, I think that's what's so sad here is that, yes, people can say, he had addiction issues and, ultimately, he was the one who chose to take that drug. But, this was a very vulnerable man, and there were a lot of people involved in this who were making a lot of money out of him and his addiction. And, you know, one of the doctors, so in court documents it came up that one of the doctors that's being charged, who's pleaded guilty to being involved in connection with Matthew Perry's ketamine case, is that he actually allegedly sent a text message saying, how much money can we make out of this moron?
Wow.
So I think that says it all, really.
Yeah, and that does kind of, I suppose, I don't know whether that has a legal impact, but it's certainly, you know, it's an awful twist and a perception of what was happening and that, you know, who this person, this Jasveen really was. It doesn't paint her in a particularly good light. Not that it's very easy to paint somebody in a good light who has a garage stashed with ketamine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just it's a very it's a complex situation. But I think that ultimately we can say that, you know, finally now the family have got Matthew Perry's family have got a little bit of closure, because at least the people involved have all pleaded guilty, and they will be sentenced. Well, she will be sentenced on December the 10th.
So it's not just her, of course. There are others involved in this too.
Yeah, so there's 4 others. There's 2 doctors who also illegally supplied him with ketamine, and there's his assistant, who was the one, administering the drug, injecting him with the drug. I think on the day of his death, he was injected with the drug, and her accomplice as well, who was a drug dealer. So between those 3, they were the ones who were kind of providing him with the ketamine.
Yeah. We will watch with interest. I'm sure we're going to talk again on this as well, Scarlett. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Scarlett House is the US correspondent for The Sun. Thank you to Scarlett. It's a grim story, and I have, you know, I know there's a line of a kind of, sorry, no pun. There's a line of thought or a kind of type of an opinion out there that, you know, if you take drugs, that's your own fault. And I kind of get that, but it does sort of rather ignore any other circumstances that might have led you to become a drunk or into drugs, recreational, prescription, or otherwise. So I do, and I think Perry was an incredibly gifted actor. So to kind of find himself in, I just sense someone like him. You're a reasonable looking bloke. You are never ever going to, I mean, how old was he when Friends was at is peak? How old would Matthew Perry have been? Yeah, it'd have been like late 20s, early 30s. So there you are, let's say a 30-year-old bloke. You are a multi-millionaire, and you've been involved and are involved with the biggest sitcom probably that has been seen globally for years, not since Different Strokes. I jest. So you've got all of that going on. And you must, as you go through your career, you think you're never going to... I always saw George Michael a bit like this. So you're never going to top. You can't... There's nothing out there that is going to... There's no greater satisfaction to come, if that makes sense. You've kind of done everything you could do. You're absolutely been at the top of your game. You're never going to be in his case, a programme that's more successful than Friends. You can't possibly earn any more money than you already have. And you sort of end up a bit rudderless. And it's a quirk, because you think, well, hang on, I've got all this stuff, but I'm still rudderless. It's a position that I suppose only those... Was it Robbie Williams that said everybody should be a millionaire or multimillionaire for a day? And give it a go. Well, we'd all like to give it a go. I kind of know what he means. So I think there's maybe a bit of that. And he seemed to be a rather lonely, quite sad character where, you know, despite the fame and the riches, it never addressed what was probably an underlying issue going on. So, and of course, he didn't deserve to die. And yes, you take drugs, you take the risks, we all get that. But if somebody is supplying you and perhaps tacitly encouraging you and then selling you iffy gear as well that might be, you know, in somehow compromised, then that, you know, that's, I think, an area where you have to say this is, you know, I think we can all conclude a very, very sad story. But people will go to jail for decades over this, 4 of them due to be sentenced. Back to your calls, Angela Rayner. I should say, by the way, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has just said in an interview, of course I will act on the findings of the ethics investigation into Angela Rayner's tax affairs, which he said should be concluded quickly. I think he stopped short of saying that she would, he would fully back her or wouldn't sack her or something of that nature. That's the usual line on these things. Georgina, down in London. Georgina, hello.
Hello, great to talk to you, Ian.
You too, far away.
Keir Starmer is not going to sack Angela Rayner because there's an old saying, you hold your friends close, you hold your enemies even closer. And Angela Rayner is the sword of Damocles hanging over Keir Starmer's head. If anything happens, she will be the premiership. She will be the prime minister. So he wants to keep an eye on her. And if she leaves the Labour Party, then she will go straight to the Corbynistas. She will be with Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, and she will probably be an even greater threat. So it's a catch-22 situation for Mr. Starmer. After saying that, she only accepted responsibility when she was caught. I assure you, if we hadn't have found out that she had been doing these little dodgy dealings, we would never have been any the wiser. And she tried to claim deniable plausibility before the fact. She was saying that she didn't know of any wrongdoing. Bear in mind, the woman had been to 3 separate bodies to give her advice on this house. Now, let's just also say that she is the Minister for Housing. This woman stands in Westminster and preaches about how things should be done. And you're telling me she doesn't know the ins and outs of a duck's bottom regarding buying and selling a property? Because I'm not swallowing that for one moment. She must think we're all stupid. So I listened to a call you had from a very astute young lady who has 2 little children who have serious disabilities. She's bought her own house. Yep. She funds her own lifestyle, and she pays her taxes. And I say kudos to that young woman. I'm proud of her, as every other woman who pays her way would be. Angela Rayner is not exempt from taxes because she is the Deputy Prime Minister. She has got to take it on the chin. She has got to resign. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And will it come to that? I don't know. Georgina, always a good, thorough, passionate call. The Prime Minister has just done an interview with the BBC. He was asked whether he would sack Angela Rayner. He said, Angela Rayner has referred herself to the independent advisor. My experience is he will be comprehensive in the report that he gives me. It will be quick, and that's what I'm expecting. So he was asked if he would sack her, and he didn't answer the question, essentially. But they never do. More from you on the way. Peter Cargwell is here with Drive at 4. We'll chat to Peter before then. Lots to get through here on the programme, even before then, in the 12 short minutes we have left. Don't be going anywhere. And by the way, some information on how you could be part and a winner of our biggest competition to date. We're giving you the chance to win £25,000. I mean, this is huge. 25,000 quid. Plus Oasis tickets. 2 lucky winners will win a pair of Oasis tickets when they return to Wembley on the 27th of September. Plus, that's not all. Alongside the tickets, we're giving one listener the chance to win that huge £25,000. For all the details on how you enter this amazing competition, have a listen to this.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word cash to 83338 and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission. Or you can enter for free by calling 0330 880 338. All entries must be received by the 19th of September at 9 a.m. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense.
Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Just plonking in the headphones. Get caught by surprise every now and again round here. Let's go to your calls. Kevin is in Dorset. Kevin, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Ian.
Good.
I think your question's wrong. I think it should be, should she survive?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's a good way to look at it.
I mean, you cannot have one rule for one and another rule for the other. And I mean, honestly, the Labour Party is the gift that keeps on giving.
Seems to be, doesn't it?
Every day there is another thing. I mean, who do they think they are? I mean, Angela Rayner, quite rightly, when she was in opposition, showed no mercy. She attacked and all the rest of it. You can't then do something like she's been doing with the House and the Trust and everything like that, and expect people not to pile in on you, because you've been piling in on people all your political career, Angela.
100%.
So don't go on the telly crying your eyes out, because between her and Rachel, we really have got two-tier Britain.
Well, that's great. Are you the first person that said that, Kevin?
Sorry?
Are you the first person that said that?
God, no, I don't know.
I like it. Between her and Rachel, it really is two-tier Britain. That's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, the law and rules, it doesn't matter whether you got whether you're from a working class background or whether you're a mega rich guy in the city. The law and the rules have to apply to everyone exactly the same. Yeah. And we cannot have... I mean, the problem is now in the country, we're losing total faith in our politicians, and we're losing faith in our courts. We're losing faith in our police force to police fairly. I mean, it's fair that we've got a government that is not fair, that thinks they should be treated differently to you, me. If I fiddle my tax or try to do that with HMRC, I'll be flagged for the rest of my life. I don't nip him round every 5 minutes.
100%.
So I think the question is, you know, she should not survive. I don't even think it's a question, Ian. You know, this has to stop. The sleaze, a housing minister who made people homeless, a corruption minister who... You know, allegedly corrupt.
Yes.
You know, I mean, maybe she asked that false solicitor for the advice.
Well, that's somebody did mention that. I mean, what was his name? Jonathan Reynolds, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Business secretary. Perhaps that's exactly where the advice came from. And Jonathan went, oh, I know all about this. Yes, I used to be a top solicitor. Maybe he reiterated it. Great call. Yeah. Kevin, thank you. I thought the two-tier thing was beautiful. Thank you for that. And in Archway, I'm more surprised that Rayner handed Starmer an excuse to get rid of her, knowing he tried unsuccessfully to before. Interesting one. Hayley in Carshalton. I don't think Angela will be able to go to her posh flat in Hove. It's not a secret address anymore, and if I were her, I'd keep away. That's a fair point as well, isn't it? Lucy, Rayner will survive if tax law is too complicated for the Deputy Prime Minister. What chance for the rest of us? If she made a mistake and expects to be forgiven, perhaps we little people should be able to expect the same as well. The story rumbles on. Keir Starmer, not when asked the question, would you sack her, he just said, oh, there's an inquiry going on. Yeah, it's funny how politicians do that, Peter Cardwell, isn't it? I mean, they don't just do they do it effortlessly and glaringly.
I mean, always say, oh, that's a hypothetical question. Well, most things are. It's like, well, if Russia invades, are you going to fight back?
Yes.
Well, that's a hypothetical question. It's like, of course you're going to fight back.
Yeah.
Russia hasn't invaded, by the way. But if Angela Rayner is found by the Ministerial Ethics Advisor to have broken the ministerial code, are you going to sack her? Yes or no? I mean, the answer is he has to, or she has to resign. I mean, if she's shown to have broken the ministerial code, there's really no way back. Although for Priti Patel, there was with Boris Johnson, so maybe they'll do that as well. But if you have someone who is your number one attack dog, who's going out against the Conservatives and Reform UK and other politicians as well for things they have done or hypocrisy or whatever, well then she's got to fall on her sword. It'll be fascinating to see what happens.
You see, a lot of the mood music this afternoon from lots of our callers, Peter, has suggested, and I tend to agree, that this is going to end up in a Priti Patel situation, that she will...
just keep on going.
The Tsar will say, yeah, I'm afraid, you know, this was not good what you did, and it's all shades of wrong. And Starmer will say, you know, Deputy Prime Minister acknowledges what she did was wrong. She might be shifted from the housing department because her credibility is completely bust in that department. But Deputy Prime Minister, of course, that's a whole internal mechanism for the Labour Party as well, isn't it? So that becomes a problem.
I was speaking to a senior Labour figure earlier today who actually told me that, you know,